Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Luke Jobson. Luke Jobson, a 22-year-old who was on the verge of qualifying as an electrical and mechanical engineer after completing 4 years of study and an apprenticeship. He was a well-liked and talented individual who was known for his athletic abilities, particularly in football. Growing up, Luke attended St. Patrick's Comprehensive and Hwood Primary Schools in Thornaby. He was a talented sportsman, playing football as a center forward for Thornaby Central in his youth. His love of clothes and fashion was evident, and he took great pride in his appearance. According to his dad, Stuart, Luke was a perfectionist who would often check his family members' clothes to ensure they looked their best. Stuart described Luke as a genuine and beautiful person, both inside and out. Luke, a young man from Yarm, attended a nightclub called The Keys on Saturday, January 26, 2019, along with his friends. Yarm is a small town, and The Keys is a popular spot on the high street, where the town's nightlife is concentrated. Luke failed to return home after his night out at The Keys, and his parents tried to contact him on Sunday morning, but he didn't respond. His friends were also unaware of his whereabouts. Luke's family quickly took to Facebook to appeal for help, and many people joined the search for him. The police investigation began on Sunday, and Cleveland police released a statement expressing concern for Luke's disappearance, as it was out of character for him. They asked the public to share any private CCTV or dashcam footage that might be relevant to the case. Police had learned about a possible altercation involving Luke shortly before his disappearance. According to reports on social media, Luke got into a fight with several people outside The Keys around 2 a.m. The last reported sighting of Luke was near Yarm School at around 2:15 a.m. The police were investigating this information, but their top priority was finding the missing young man. Luke's girlfriend, Danny, made a heartfelt plea on social media, describing her experience as a living nightmare and urging anyone with information to come forward. Luke's cousin, Jake, also reached out on Facebook, asking for help in locating Luke. He was last seen fleeing from a group of young men on Yarm High Street. Friends and family initiated a search for Luke near the River Tees in Yarm on Sunday, which eventually grew into a large-scale operation. By Monday morning, hundreds of concerned individuals gathered at Yarm School's car park, eager to contribute to the search. Despite many not knowing Luke personally, the overwhelming response to the Facebook appeal showcased the community's spirit. Cars arrived at the car park, carrying people who were ready to aid in the search. Many others arrived on foot, dressed in warm clothing, prepared to brave the cold weather. Over 300 people participated in the search, which was divided into 18 groups that scoured various areas, including Preston Park, Stokesley, Cottonwood, Early Nook, and Hilton. Specialist police search teams also combed the River Tees banks near Yarm School. A body found in a River Tees has been identified as 22-year-old Luke Jobson, who had been missing. Cleveland police confirmed the news and expressed their condolences to Luke's family and friends. Family members are being supported by specially trained officers during this difficult time. In a tribute, Luke's parents, Lisa Jobson and Stuart Banks, described their son as a popular and ambitious young man who loved working out at the gym. Luke's mother, Lisa, said they are proud of everything he achieved and want to celebrate his life. She added that they want everyone to remember him for the good things he did. The news of Luke's death sparked an outpouring of emotion in the Teesside community. Friends and family members flooded social media with tributes, and a huge crowd gathered in Yarm for a vigil in his memory. Almost 1,000 people attended the event, which included a firework display and a rendition of Angels by Robbie Williams. The community showed their support for Luke's family by leaving ribbons, balloons, and flowers near the scene of his death. As the police investigated Luke's death, they spoke to numerous individuals, including those who were at the nightclub on the night of the incident. They also obtained CCTV footage, which corroborated earlier reports of a confrontation between Luke and several others. The footage shows Luke wearing a gray t-shirt, jeans, and white sneakers. It appears that Luke made a comment to someone, which caused several aggressive-looking individuals to approach him. The situation quickly escalated, and Luke can be seen running away from the group as they chase after him. News of a confrontation being linked to Luke's death emerged soon after he disappeared, as speculation about what had happened spread on social media. Initially, the police only confirmed reports of an altercation prior to his disappearance. They arrested 6 teenagers, aged from 16 to 18, on suspicion of involvement in Luke's death, but later released all of them. The investigation continued, and a new development in the case occurred the following January. Cleveland police announced that 5 people, aged 17 to 20, had been charged with a fray, which involves using or threatening unlawful violence, but not with Luke's death. They were set to appear in court. The 5 individuals charged include a 17-year-old, now 18, who cannot be named due to age restrictions, Edwin Taha, 20, Ryan Alp, 19, Ali Abdul Majid, 19, and Hamad Asif, 18. According to reports, Edwin Taha was the alleged leader of the group. In England and Wales, a person can be charged with a fray if they use or threaten violence towards another person in a way that would cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety. To understand the events leading up to Luke Jobson's death, we need to consider the following points. Firstly, when 2 or more people use or threaten violence, their actions are considered collectively. Secondly, for a threat to be valid in this context, it cannot be purely verbal. Looking at the recording, it's clear that Luke was concerned for his safety as he was seen running away. The threats against him were not just verbal. Unfortunately, the exact cause of the conflict remains unclear, as none of the suspects provided a clear answer. Additionally, the whereabouts of Luke's friends, who were with him at the nightclub, are unknown at the time of the quarrel. The police recording does not provide this information. From the footage, it appears that Luke was not planning to leave the club, as he was standing outside in just a t-shirt, with his jacket still inside. The footage shows Luke confronting a group before being forced to run for his safety. Initially, his athletic ability allowed him to overcome his suitors. However, the group, including Taha and other future defendants, returned to the nightclub, got into a car, and caught up with Luke near a school. They sprayed Luke's face with an unknown substance, suspected to be pepper spray, causing him to lose his sight. In an attempt to escape, Luke climbed over a wall into the school grounds, where CCTV cameras captured his entry into a boathouse. Sadly, this was the last time Luke was seen alive. After Taha pepper sprayed Luke's face, the group got back into their car and drove away. It's unclear whether Luke knew where he was going, but given that he didn't attend school there and was disoriented from the tear gas, it's unlikely he understood his surroundings. If this was the case, it's possible he accidentally fell into the water once he entered the boathouse. It's worth noting that these events took place in January, when the water in the river was extremely cold. According to the police, no one else entered the boathouse that night, and Luke never came out. 2 days later, the police found his body in the water near the school, and the cause of death was determined to be drowning. The suspects initially refused to admit guilt, but during the first court hearing on September 28, 2020, Edwin Taha and Ali Abdul changed their minds and admitted to their involvement in the fight. Autopsy results from pathologists Dr. Nigel Cooper and Dr. Jennifer Bolton revealed that Luke had consumed alcohol before his death. The amount he drank was likely to cause noticeable signs of intoxication in an average person. The police had released Edwin Taha on bail, and none of the suspects were detained before the trial. The investigation found that the victim had traces of a banned substance in his system, which, combined with alcohol, made him more vulnerable to hypothermia. There were no injuries or evidence of assault, and the deceased did not have any underlying medical conditions that contributed to his death. While the autopsy did not show any signs of eye inflammation or evidence of being sprayed with a substance, witness statements confirmed that the deceased, Luke, was pepper sprayed and struggled to walk and see. The perpetrator, Taha, later bragged about the incident on the high street. The coroner concluded that Luke was incapacitated by the pepper spray. The verdict was announced in October 2020. In an emotional statement, Luke's mother, Lisa Jobson, addressed the court as the individuals responsible for her son's death faced justice. Ms. Jobson described the gang that had surrounded her son, Luke, before chasing him through Yarm High Street as a pack of wolves. She explained that from the day Luke was born, he had been loved, cared for, and protected. He had been their world and their only son. They had been extremely close to him, and he had been a kind, gentle, and genuine person who had touched the hearts of everyone he had met. Luke had been a loving and caring individual who had lit up a room with his presence. He had had good friends from diverse backgrounds and cultures, and he hadn't had a mean bone in his body. He had been a positive person who always strived to be his best and had always been looking forward to new experiences. Ms. Jobson expressed that they would never forget the terror Luke had faced that night, and the fact that none of the gang members had had the courage to take responsibility for their actions was unbearable. Knowing that their faces had been the last ones Luke had seen on this earth was a constant reminder of the pain and suffering he had endured. It was a living hell for them, and they were left to live with the knowledge that their son hadn't been able to escape safely. At the trial, the lawyer for Abdul's co-defendant stated that Abdul was unaware that Taha possessed pepper spray. He claimed that Abdul did not expect the victim to be assaulted with a weapon. Only one person, not Abdul, knew that Taha had a pepper spray. Taha's lawyer revealed that his client had a difficult childhood, which had led to poor decision-making. On the night of the incident, something was said that triggered a chain of events. Taha acknowledges that the outcome should never have happened. Taha's lawyer also shared that his client had moved to the UK from France at age 4 and had been left to live with a foster family after his mother returned to France. The judge emphasized that neither defendant was directly responsible for the victim's death, but noted that the chase had led to the victim entering the school and boathouse, ultimately resulting in drowning. Taha, 20, was sentenced to 21 months in prison after pleading guilty to a fracas. He also received an additional 4 years and 4 months for charges related to prohibited substances. 19-year-old Abdul, of Corvus Drive in Stockton, has been sentenced to 15 months in prison, suspended for 18 months, after admitting his involvement in an incident that led to the death of Luke. Abdul was also ordered to complete 300 hours of unpaid work. According to the court, Abdul was driving the car that pursued Luke on the night of the incident. The court heard that the altercation started on Yarm High Street, where Luke was chased by a group of males in a vehicle. When they caught up with him, he was sprayed in the eyes with a noxious substance, which had a severe effect on him. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Robinson stated that the altercation had a devastating impact on Luke's family, who have been left without their son and brother. She added that the incident has caused immense pain and hardship for the family, and that nothing can bring Luke back. However, now that the case has concluded, the family may find some closure and be able to move forward with their lives. Charges against 2 other individuals, 19-year-old Ryan Alp and 18-year-old Hamad Asif, were dropped. To summarize the case, Chris Atkinson of the Crown Prosecution Service made a statement after the sentencing in October 2020. He stated that although Taha and Abdul were found guilty, the focus remains on Luke Jobson's family, who may find this time particularly challenging. The prosecution successfully proved that both men were involved in an altercation with Luke before his death. However, it is essential to note that there is no evidence to suggest that their actions directly caused the tragic events that followed the attack. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of the Parente family. In April 2009, Stephanie Parente's friends and college officials became concerned when she did not attend her classes on a particular Monday, as they knew she would not miss her final exams. The college officials reached out to a local hotel, requesting a welfare check on Stephanie and her family. Upon attempting to enter the room that had been reserved by the family, a housekeeper discovered the door was locked, and there was no response from inside. When the hotel staff members finally gained entry to the room, the gruesome scene they discovered was deeply disturbing. Investigations revealed the grim reality of what had occurred in the room, shocking not only those familiar with the family, but also the residents of the town and even the entire state. This is the tragic case of the Parente family. William Michael Parente was born on July 20, 1949, in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, where his parents, Willie and Rulon Parente, provided the foundation for his upbringing. Hailing from a family with a history in law enforcement, with his father serving as a New York trooper, Parente's childhood was marked by a solitary existence, being the sole focus of his parents' attention. Summers were spent enjoying the sun with family in Long Beach. His educational journey took him through the halls of Brooklyn College and Brooklyn Law School, with financial assistance from his uncle Anthony J. Russo, who generously covered his tuition. Within the busy atmosphere of his Manhattan office on the Avenue of the Americas, Parente earned the respect of his colleagues as a hard-working legal professional and devoted family man. He was consistently courteous, even towards his loyal secretary, and spent long, though not excessive, hours immersed in his work. Parente's disciplined lifestyle, which did not involve profanity or post-work social gatherings, set him apart in the legal field. He never cursed or spoke rudely to anyone, even on bad days. In 1977, Parente got married to Betty Mazzarella. After being admitted to the New York bar, he started his legal career at a prestigious Wall Street law firm. However, in 1988, when Betty became pregnant with their first child, Parente decided to transition into private practice. This pivotal decision coincided with the family's relocation to Garden City, New York, an affluent community in Nassau County, Long Island. Despite living in the suburbs, the Parente family maintained strong connections to Parente's Brooklyn roots. They frequently revisited his old neighborhood, indulging in local delicacies, reconnecting with lifelong friends, visiting his mother, and reliving cherished childhood memories, such as their annual Halloween tradition of trick-or-treating in familiar surroundings alongside their daughters. At the age of 60, William Parente was an experienced estate and tax attorney operating his practice from a firm located in a shopping center in Queens. Meanwhile, his wife, Betty Mazzarella, aged 58, devoted her time to homemaking duties while actively organizing charity fundraisers within their local community. Betty also played a significant role in church activities, deeply embedded in the social fabric of their neighborhood. The couple shared the joys of parenthood with two daughters, Stephanie and Catherine. Stephanie, the elder daughter, was 19 at the time and pursuing her studies as a sophomore at Loyola College in Towson, about 3 hours away from her hometown. Her academic focus lay in speech pathology, with aspirations of pursuing dentistry in the future. Stephanie's amiable nature endeared her to both classmates and faculty alike, maintaining strong ties with her friends back home in Garden City. Their younger daughter, Catherine, aged 11, exhibited exceptional talent and was highly admired by the teachers and staff at Garden City Middle School. Her precocious abilities showcased her potential to excel in various endeavors, indicating a promising future for this cherished member of the Parente family. Towards the later stages of his legal career, Parente ventured into what he referred to as bridge loans, effectively assuming the role of a financial intermediary, similar to a bank. Reportedly, Parente utilized assets from investment portfolios under his management to finance these loans. When at least one investor requested the return of their funds, Parente was unable to promptly fulfill the request or provide a satisfactory justification for his inability to do so. On April 15, 2009, William Parente, accompanied by his wife, Betty, and their youngest daughter, Catherine, embarked on a trip to Towson to surprise Stephanie, their eldest daughter. They secured room Zen29 at the Sheraton Hotel near the Towson Town Center Mall, with reservations extending until the 19th. Upon their arrival, Stephanie's friend said she was surprised by the unexpected visit, especially considering that everyone had just recently returned to classes following a brief Easter break, and Stephanie's current focus was preparing for an upcoming chemistry exam. Adding to the intrigue was the fact that the parents had a pre-arranged visit scheduled for Friday the 17th, involving an on-campus meeting to discuss Stephanie's potential study abroad plans in England. Despite the initial surprise, the visit unfolded like any other family reunion. The events of that fateful day remained shrouded in ambiguity, but based on the evidence that was uncovered, the sequence of events unfolded as follows. Betty Mazzarella Parente, the wife, was the first to fall victim on that Sunday morning. She was subjected to a brutal assault, suffocation, and left lifeless in bed. Shortly thereafter, Catherine, their youngest daughter, met a similar fate, succumbing to the same violent methods as her mother and being placed beside her. Later in the afternoon, Stephanie arrived at the hotel after leaving her campus. Tragically, she too met a grim demise, mirroring the fate of her mother and sister, and was laid beside them on the bed. None of the victims displayed any signs of struggle, and neither evidence of drugging nor physical restraint was found. William Parente meticulously orchestrated the annihilation of his family on that somber Sunday. Around midnight on the 19th, one of Stephanie's close friends and roommates became worried when she didn't return to their dorm room after several hours. The roommate called the hotel room where Stephanie was supposed to be studying for final exams. Instead of Stephanie, her father Parente answered the phone and explained that she was staying at the hotel with family. The roommate believed the excuse and ended the call, unaware that Stephanie had already passed away. Reflecting on the conversation, the roommate later remembered that Parente seemed different over the phone compared to his usual self. Early Monday morning, Parente ended his own life by using a knife he bought from the nearby mall. He fatally wounded himself and died from his injuries in the hotel bathroom. Hotel staff became aware of the family's failure to check out on Monday, and there was growing concern from Loyola College regarding Stephanie's unexplained absence from classes and her complete non-attendance for the day, especially during a crucial time for her final exams, which raised red flags. Officials from the college reached out to the hotel, urging them to conduct a welfare check on Stephanie and her family. Around 3 p.m., a housekeeper tried to enter the family's room on the 10th floor, but found the door locked, and no one answered. The housekeeper told other staff members what happened. A hotel manager then went into the room and found William Parente's lifeless body in the bathroom. He had ended his life with a knife. The manager called emergency services right away. The manager continued with the difficult task and went further into the room. There, he found a Hornor site, 3 bodies arranged on one of the beds. The deceased were Betty Mazzarella, along with her 2 daughters, Stephanie and Catherine. The Baltimore County Police were called to the scene, and all other guests on the 10th floor were moved as part of the investigation. The family's Mercedes-Benz SUV was also taken from the hotel's parking lot by law enforcement officials. Police investigations determined that Parente perpetrated the tragic murder-suicide of his family on that Sunday, as previously mentioned. While the exact sequence of events remains shrouded in horror, authorities identified the causes of the deaths as asphyxiation and blunt force trauma. Betty and the young daughter Catherine were presumed to be the initial victims, followed by Stephanie. Law enforcement believed that one of William's last interactions was with Stephanie's husband, who tried to contact Stephanie by phone around midnight. Unfortunately, Stephanie had already been harmed by her father at that point. Following this call, it is thought that he went to the bathroom and ended his own life with a knife he had bought from the mall earlier. The horrific events shook investigators as they tried to understand the unimaginable terror the family went through. Parente, who did not leave a suicide note, was suspected of killing his family and then himself due to the increasing suspicion around his possible involvement in a fraud case. More specifically, Parente was connected to a Ponzi scheme, a deceitful investment plan that used money from new investors to pay off old ones, causing significant financial harm. This scheme, which had allegedly defrauded investors of approximately $20 million, resulted in direct complaints against Parente, with one investor reporting a loss of $450,000. Financial investigations revealed that checks totaling $245,000 issued by Parente to investors had bounced, prompting further complaints to the New York Attorney General's office. Following Michael's demise, some investors disclosed that they had suffered multi-million-dollar losses. However, as highlighted by a fellow attorney, monetary losses can be recuperated, but the irreplaceable loss of lives underscores the gravity and tragedy of the situation. Friends and family grappled with a mix of sorrow and anger in the wake of the tragedy. At Loyola College, Stephanie's friends organized a service on Monday night to honor her memory. Meanwhile, the once lively family home transformed into a somber space adorned with heartfelt tributes like flowers and candlelit vigils. Upon hearing the devastating news, Catherine's classmates at Garden City Middle School came together to dedicate a poignant football game in her honor, offering a collective gesture of remembrance and solidarity. Within the span of less than a week, Maryland had witnessed two separate instances of familicide. The other case involved Christopher Wood, who was from Middletown, a town in Maryland, which occurred on April 16th, less than 4 days from the other one taking place. The close temporal and geographical proximity of these tragedies garnered significant media attention, prompting discussions about the correlation between economic hardship and incidents of familicide and suicide. A funeral service was held to commemorate Betty and her daughters at St. Joseph's Church in Garden City. According to reports from Garden City Life, Catherine's middle school classmates were transported by bus to attend the service. Stephanie's college peers made a significant effort to join the event, driving from Towson and arriving as early as 4 a.m. to be part of the morning ceremony. The family was laid to rest at St. Charles Cemetery in East Farmingdale, New York, where they were buried together. In contrast, William Parente received a separate private funeral service at a different location. He was cremated, but the specific whereabouts of his ashes were not disclosed to the public. The sorrowful and regrettable circumstances endured by all the victims in the face of this merciless perpetrator are deeply distressing. As we reflect on this horrific tale, our hearts and minds are with the individuals whose lives were abruptly ended and the grieving families and friends they left behind. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jessica Lunsford. In the quiet town of Homosassa, Florida, a young girl named Jessica Marie Lunsford was abducted from her home in the middle of the night. She was just 9 years old, full of innocence and dreams for the future. Her abduction sent shockwaves through the community and exposed a grave failure in the system meant to protect children. As news of Jessica's disappearance spread, a massive search effort was launched. Law enforcement, volunteers, and concerned citizens thoroughly searched the area, desperately hoping to bring her back safely. Jessica's family and friends, filled with anguish and fear, clung to hope while recounting stories of her contagious laughter, vibrant personality, and the joy she had brought into their lives. Days had passed, turning into weeks, and the search grew more intense. The tragedy of Jessica's disappearance highlighted the importance of community vigilance and the need for swift action in cases involving missing children. Law enforcement agencies worked tirelessly to uncover the truth, following leads and leaving no stone unturned. Their dedication to finding Jessica and bringing those responsible to justice became paramount. This is the story of Jessica Marie Lunsford, a young girl whose life was tragically cut short, but whose memory continues to inspire change. Jessica Marie Lunsford was born on October 6, 1995, and lived most of her life in North Carolina, with her parents, Mark and Angela. When she was born, she had a few older teenage siblings. She was considered a miracle baby, as her mother Angela had suffered a few miscarriages before her birth. However, her parents divorced a year after she was born, and her father was granted full custody. For most of her life, she was the only child living with her father, and the two were very close, like best friends. Mark worked in construction and sometimes couldn't afford a babysitter, so he would bring his daughter to work with him. She would hang out, talk to his co-workers, and play with wood chips, and everyone loved her. Eventually, her grandparents moved to Homosassa, Florida, to be with them. They would go shopping and play games together. They would also take her out and go to karaoke, as Jessica wanted to be a musician. She was inspired by her two favorite artists, Pink and Shania Twain. Her career interests changed frequently because she loved to do many things, including acting and working in fashion. Her dream of working in fashion was inspired by her grandmother, who often took her shopping to fabric stores and also sewed clothes for her dolls. Jessica was an outgoing, affectionate, and friendly girl who loved hugs and cuddling and treated everyone with love and kindness. One day, when Jessica was 9 years old, her father had a date with a woman he had not dated since his divorce from Angela, so he was very happy about it. He left Jessica with her grandparents, who would put her to bed when he wasn't home. He went out to meet his date and ended up staying the night at her house. When he showed up the following morning to take Jessica to school, he heard Jessica's alarm ringing and was surprised that she hadn't shut it off yet. He then went to her room and found her bed empty. Her school clothes were untouched. She was nowhere in the house, and she wasn't outside. That's when he realized he had forgotten to lock the door after he had left. Mark became anxious and contacted the police to report that Jessica was missing. After finishing the call, he reached out to every person he knew and inquired if they had seen or heard from her. Her grandparents had not seen her since they had put her to bed. And her grandfather did not check on her when he woke up at 3 a.m. to use the bathroom. The police issued a nationwide alert about the missing 9-year-old girl and received assistance from 100 people who went out to search for her. The police asked if it was possible that she had run away to look for her mother, whom she had not seen for 4 years, but Mark said she would never do that. She would never just go off searching for her mother, and besides, her mother lived in a different state. Police tried to rule out every possible scenario before assuming it was an abduction case. They also asked if she might have engaged in any online conversations with strangers, as this was the early 2000s, when online chat rooms and the associated dangers were becoming a new problem. Mark said no, she's 9 years old and does not participate in any of that online internet activity. Mark also noticed that a purple dolphin stuffed animal, which he had won for Jessica at a fair just a few weeks earlier, and which Jessica loved, was missing. This led the police to confirm that it was most likely a case of abduction. The police accessed the sex offender registry and conducted a search for all sex offenders and pedophiles in the area, performing door-to-door interviews to gather information, check for any suspicious activity, and obtain alibis. The investigators had a significant task ahead of them, as their registry search identified 208 sex offenders they needed to look into. Mark and Jessica's grandfather were questioned and considered possible suspects. It was distressing for them to sit through 3 days of repeated interrogation and questioning about whether they were involved in Jessica's disappearance, if they had harmed her, given her away, or were in any way responsible. They were deeply concerned, as they cared greatly for Jessica. Her father was her closest friend, and her grandfather adored her. Being treated as suspects was heartbreaking. They both underwent polygraph tests, which they passed, even though such tests are not entirely reliable and are not admissible as evidence in court. Angela had not seen her daughter in years and had even remarried and had a child. She had not heard anything about Jessica missing. The police were running out of leads, and everything had started to feel hopeless. Until they visited the home of 46-year-old John Cooey, one of the sex offenders. John Cooey was a dangerous man who had several convictions, including a dozen robbery charges, and was also a registered sex offender. During the investigation, he had an outstanding warrant for his arrest for being in possession of cannabis. When the police went to his home, they found out that he had relocated without informing the police, which is a federal violation. Sex offenders are required to inform the police whenever they relocate, so that the information can be updated in the sex offender registry. With a few family members, the police went to the trailer where John's sister lived. His sister informed the police that he was living with them, but she was not sure where he was at the moment. Nevertheless, what the police did not know was that they were just a few feet away from Jessica at that time, while she was still alive. During the period, they were questioning John's family concerning his whereabouts. The police entered the house and looked through some doors, but they were not allowed to search further at that moment. The frightened young girl was sitting in the dark closet of John's bedroom, not making any noise, as she was instructed by him to remain quiet and stay in the closet regardless of what occurred. It is unfortunate that Jessica was very close to being rescued. If only the closet door had been opened after the weekend when Jessica had first gone missing. Police came to check on John once again. His niece had given him money for a bus ticket, but didn't know where he was going. John was a prime suspect, as he had been running away just a few days after Jessica had originally gone missing, which raised red flags for the police, along with the fact that his sister's trailer was located around 100 yards away from Jessica's home. They finally found John at a homeless shelter, where he had used his real name to sign in. He told the police he was there to find work. He was questioned about Jessica, but claimed he had no idea what happened to the girl and had never known of her existence until he saw the news. The police had to release him at that particular time, as they had no grounds to hold him. They released him on March 12th, a few weeks after Jessica had gone missing. The officers later obtained a search warrant to look through his sister's trailer. In his bedroom, inside his closet, the police found a mattress with blood stains. DNA testing on the mattress matched that of Jessica's. John was immediately arrested and charged with the kidnapping and murder of Jessica Lansford. On March 18, 2005, John Cooey made a confession to the police. He had initially intended to break in and rob the home, but he made too much noise, and Jessica woke up and saw him. Panicked, he was afraid that she would inform on him, as she had seen his face. Without thinking, he grabbed her and put his hand over her mouth, telling her not to scream. He informed her that she had to go with him, but before leaving, she requested if she could get her preferred stuffed animal, which he agreed to. She returned with the purple dolphins that her father had won for her at the fair. Once they reached his home, he sexually assaulted her and told her to stay in his bed and not leave the room, and they fell asleep. The following morning, he sexually assaulted her again, instructing her not to make any noise and never come out under any circumstances, as there would be negative consequences if she did. Then he left for work. When he returned home, he discovered that the police were asking questions and knew he had to take action. He was unsure whether to let her go back home because he feared returning to prison. Instead, when the house was empty, he sexually assaulted Jessica one last time and told her he would take her back home to her father, but she had to comply with his demands. He opened 2 large plastic garbage bags and told her to get inside, along with her stuffed animal. He informed her that he would drop her off at her house and she could break free from the bags. However, he dug a hole approximately 3 feet deep, buried her alive, and then escaped. It was very sad because John would have been caught digging a hole and placing her body inside it if the view wasn't completely blocked off by a giant tent that the police put up near Jessica's home in case something happened and they were needed right away. This had the opposite effect. Jessica could have been saved, but the chance was gone. After retrieving the body from the ground, the medical examiner discovered that Jessica had used her last breath of strength to try and free herself by poking 2 of her fingers through the plastic bags, and her 2 fingers were skeletonized. The medical examiner said that she had run out of air and suffocated after roughly 1 to 3 minutes of being on the ground, and the rest of the body had average to severe decomposition. Initially, the judge had ruled that John's confession would be inadmissible in court, as he confessed without his lawyer present. However, the trial court decided that all evidence gathered after the confession, including the discovery of the body, autopsy report, and incriminating statements made by him to investigators and a jail guard, would be admissible in court. John's trial had to be held in Miami, as they could not find an impartial jury in Homosassa. On March 7, 2007, John was found guilty of the following crimes: first-degree murder, kidnapping, assault or battery on a person, burglary, and sexual battery. He was sentenced to death, but on September 30, 2009, before his sentence could be carried out, he died of natural causes, approximately 2 years after murdering Jessica. Jessica's family, who endured unimaginable pain and grief, became advocates for stronger laws and measures to protect children. Their unwavering commitment to ensuring that no other family experiences such a tragedy is a testament to their love for Jessica. Jessica will be remembered as a sociable, caring, and warm-hearted girl who loved hugs and embraced and treated everyone with love and generosity. Jessica's story sparked a nationwide conversation about the safety of our children, prompting communities to come together, demanding reforms, and raising awareness about the importance of protecting and cherishing every child. The investigation into Jessica's abduction led to changes in legislation, ensuring that sex offenders are closely monitored and that law enforcement agencies have the necessary tools to prevent similar incidents from occurring in the future. As we remember Jessica, we honor her memory by continuing to work towards a world where every child can grow up in safety and security. Her spirit lives on through the actions and advocacy of those inspired by her story. In the end, Jessica Marie Lunsford's legacy will serve as a powerful reminder that we must remain vigilant in protecting our children. May her memory inspire us to create a society where every child can thrive. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sarah Everard. Sarah Everard was born in June 1987 to Jeremy Everard and Susan Everard. Her father worked as a professor of electronics at the University of York, England, United Kingdom, and her mother worked in charity. She was the youngest of 3 children in the family, with older siblings James Everard and Catherine Everard. The family home was located in a quiet cul-de-sac in the Heslington area of the city, and Sarah would often be seen playing in the street with her siblings and other local children. She attended the local comprehensive Fulford School in 2005, where she was remembered as an incredibly likable, vibrant, caring and popular girl who excelled at sports and performed well academically. After completing her A-levels, she left Fulford School in 2005 after securing a place at Durham University, where she studied for a degree in human geography and graduated in 2008. Sarah started her career as an account executive at Proximity London in July 2008, where she worked for 4 months. After that, she joined Rapier as a senior account manager in September 2009. She worked there for 3 years and 6 months before leaving to work at a travel agency. From February 2021, Sarah has been working as a digital account director at McCormack & Morrison, as well as a freelance client lead at Flipside Group, a freelance company. On the evening of 3rd March 2021, Sarah was walking home to Brixton Hill from a friend's house near Clapham Common. Unfortunately, something terrible happened. The following day, Sarah's boyfriend, Josh, reported her disappearance to the police. They were supposed to meet, but she didn't show up and didn't respond to any of his calls. Her family and friends were shocked, as she was in regular contact with them, and it was completely out of character for her to disappear like that. A large-scale search operation was launched, involving hundreds of officers and members of the public. The search concentrated on the area between Clapham and Brixton, including parks, woodlands, and other open spaces where CCTV footage had captured Sarah's presence the previous night. Police stated that she was believed to have walked through Clapham Common after leaving her friend's flat and heading towards her home in Brixton, a journey that should have taken approximately 50 minutes. The police issued a public appeal for information, requesting anyone who had witnessed Sarah or had any relevant information that could assist the investigation to come forward. They released footage captured from the dashcam of a passing police car and a private doorbell-type camera, which showed Sarah walking alone along the A205 Pointers Road towards Tulse Hill, south of Brixton. She spoke to her boyfriend on her phone for around 15 minutes and agreed to meet him the following day. It was uncertain whether she made it home. The police also released a photo of Sarah and a description of her attire when she was last seen. She was wearing a green rain jacket, navy blue trousers with a white diamond pattern, and turquoise and orange sneakers. It was believed that she was also wearing green earphones and a white beanie hat. The investigation was led by the Metropolitan Police's Specialist Crime Command, which deployed over 120 officers and staff to work on the case. The search was conducted with the assistance of police dogs, helicopters, and specialist search teams. Specialist officers were brought in from across the force, and the police received more than 120 calls from the public regarding the case. They asked anyone who may have relevant dashcam or other footage to come forward. Sniffer dogs searched gardens in streets around the search site, near Everard's presumed route home, and in the nearby Oaklands estate. Officers also searched a pond in Clapham Common and drains along the A205. Investigators quickly found CCTV footage showing a police officer from the force's Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command, later identified as Wayne Couzens, with Sarah Everard on 2 occasions. The footage depicted them next to a rented Vauxhall Astra, along with the car's license plate. It was discovered that on the 28th February 2021, Couzens had reserved a white Vauxhall car from a rental company in Dover. On the 3rd March, after finishing a 12-hour shift at the US Embassy in London, he travelled to Kent to pick up the rented vehicle. Subsequently, he drove back to London, where he was seen in Earl's Court and on Battersea Bridge. Upon reaching Clapham, he drove to Earl's Court again before returning to Clapham around the time Sarah Everard went missing. Couzens had parked the Vauxhall on the pavement outside Pointers Court, stopped Everard, and showed her his police warrant card before handcuffing her. Around that time, Couzens and Everard entered the car, and Couzens drove to Kent, where the route of the car was retrospectively tracked using CCTV and ANPR. Couzens and Everard were again spotted in Dover, and had transferred to Couzens' personal seat car. Couzens then drove to Hodes Wood near Ashford, where his car was captured on CCTV in the area between 3:22 and 6:32, before driving back to Dover to switch back into his rental car before returning it. The Metropolitan Police then arrested Wayne Couzens, along with a woman, at an address in Kent in connection with Everard's disappearance, and they were taken into custody. However, the woman was later released without charge as the detectives continued their investigation. They found that Couzens had told senior colleagues that he was suffering from stress and no longer wanted to carry a gun. Couzens bought and filled a petrol container at a service station in Whitfield and then drove to Hodes Wood, where his car was captured on CCTV at 12:37. He reported himself ill from work, handing in his equipment, including his police belt and handcuffs, which raised suspicions of murder. The police searched Hoadswood and found human remains that were confirmed to be Everard's body through dental records. Her remains were found in a large builder's bag, approximately 100 meters from a plot of land that Cousins owned. The police also searched the site of a former body repair garage previously owned by Cousins' family at the top of the White Cliffs. The detectives questioned Cousins and learned that when his mobile phone had connected to cell sites in the area of Clapham, where he had sexually assaulted Sarah and strangled her to death using his police duty belt, he burned Everard's body inside a refrigerator he had bought. He then bought 2 large builder bags from B&Q before returning to Hoadswood, where he used one of the bags to dispose of Everard's remains in a pond. He drove his personal car to Sandwich, Kent, disposing of Everard's mobile phone, where the police divers searched underwater in one of the town's watercourses. The police also focused their search operation around the rope walk in Sandwich and cordoned off approximately 1 square mile of the town. Sarah's disappearance and the heartbreaking discovery of her remains drew people from all walks of life together in grief and solidarity. The call for change echoed through the streets as individuals raised their voices to demand a safer world for women. Sarah, a vibrant and compassionate soul, was a beloved daughter, sister, and friend. Her disappearance left her loved ones devastated and searching for answers in a world where her safety should have been guaranteed. The investigation concluded that Sarah Everard had died from compression of the neck, according to the results of a post-mortem held at William Harvey Hospital in Ashford. Cousins was charged with Everard's kidnapping and murder following authorization from the Crown Prosecution Service. He appeared at Westminster Magistrates' Court and was remanded in custody before appearing at the Old Bailey from Belmarsh Prison. Cousins pleaded guilty to kidnap and sexual assault and admitted responsibility for Everard's death on the 30th of September. Cousins was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order, with Fulford justifying the severity of the punishment by saying that Cousins' use of his position as a police officer to detain Everard was the vital factor that made the seriousness of this case exceptionally high. Cousins tried to apply for leave to appeal against his sentence, but his appeal against his whole life sentence was rejected by the Court of Appeal as of December 2021. Cousins was imprisoned at HM Prison Franklin in County Durham and was further charged with 4 counts of indecent exposure related to alleged incidents in January and February 2021. He pleaded guilty to 3 incidents of indecent exposure that took place in Kent in 2020 and 2021. Sarah's story has sparked important discussions about women's safety and empowerment, leading to various initiatives and advocacy movements, with the shared goal of creating a world where women can walk freely without fear. The global outcry for change following Sarah's tragedy calls for accountability, respect, and a shift in societal attitudes towards women's safety. We honor Sarah's memory by working towards a world where every woman can live without fear, where safety is a basic right, and where unity and empathy prevail. Sarah Everard's legacy will be one of strength, unity, and hope, inspiring us all to stand against violence, support women's rights, and strive for a world where everyone can live without fear. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Heather Jackson. Heather Jackson, a 23-year-old mother of 2, had just found a house on a quiet street near Lake Erie. She was thrilled to have a new place to call home, especially after separating from her husband Wayne and going through a divorce. Despite the challenges they faced as parents, Heather and Wayne were once a happy couple, but their marriage didn't survive the struggles. After the breakup, Heather faced tough times, but she didn't give up. She focused on making her children, 3-year-old Selena and 1-year-old Wayne Jr., happy. On September 8, 2012, Heather's friend Danielle arrived at a house at 2:30 p.m. as they had planned. However, when Danielle knocked on the door, no one answered. She checked all the doors, but they were locked. This was unusual, as Heather would normally let her know if she had to change plans. Danielle's concern grew as she realized Heather and her children were not at home. Danielle tried to reach Heather by calling her mother, Jody, but was unable to get in touch with her that day. Failing that, Danielle contacted all of Heather's friends, but none of them knew her whereabouts. Then Danielle spotted Selena's pacifier on the porch, which made her increasingly anxious. She knew Heather would never leave the house without it. As the hours ticked by with no call from Heather, Jody grew more and more uneasy, her intuition screaming warning signals. She decided to take action and phoned the police, asking them to perform a welfare check. When the officers arrived at the address, they knocked on the door, but received no response. Next, they made their way around the house, peering through the windows, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. With no signs of forced entry or any indication of foul play, they departed. At approximately 7:30 p.m., Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner, friends of Heather, arrived at her house, having learned that she was missing. They knocked on the front door, but there was no response. Reiner then proceeded to the back porch, forced open the door, and entered the home. Upon entering, they discovered Heather's lifeless body in the bedroom, completely naked, and immediately called the emergency services. Sergeant Eric Gray Bill, a police officer with the Sandusky Force, responded to the call and entered Heather Jackson's home. He found Heather's body awkwardly positioned between the box spring and mattress in her bedroom, with a ligature constricting her neck. Notably, the TV in the house was still operational, but the children were absent. Their room was empty. While inspecting the house, the officers came across a door to a utility closet that they hadn't checked yet. Upon opening it, Sergeant Eric Gray Bill was met with a horrific sight. Stacked boxes, and behind them, the lifeless bodies of Heather's children. The police immediately sealed off the area, treating it as a crime scene. The local officers were left stunned, having never encountered anything so heinous in their careers. The brutal murder of innocent children left them struggling to comprehend how someone could commit such an atrocity. The forensic examination results only added to the devastation felt by Heather's family and friends. According to court documents, Dr. Diana Scala Barnett, the deputy coroner for Lucas County, performed autopsies on the 3 victims. She determined that Heather Jackson's cause of death was ligature strangulation and observed that Heather's rectum was found to be more open than usual after death. Dr. Scala Barnett attributed this to the likely introduction of an object into the rectum around the time of death, which kept it in that state. Dr. Scala Barnett also testified that Wayne Jackson and Selena Jackson died from ligature strangulation. She noted that Selena's underwear had been rolled up, suggesting that the body had been redressed. Furthermore, Selena's rectum showed a similar dilation to her mother's, again indicating that an object was present in her rectum at or around the time of death. Julie Cox, a forensic scientist at the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, reported that the anal swabs taken from Selena Jackson contained seminal fluid. Cox also observed a suspicious stain on Selena Jackson's underwear, which she excised and tested, finding it to contain a sperm cell. The police were under pressure to swiftly identify and apprehend the culprit behind these heinous crimes. Heather's residence was conveniently located near Firelands Regional Medical Center, and investigators believed that surveillance footage from the building's CCTV cameras might aid in their search for the perpetrator. Upon reviewing the footage, they spotted a car pulling up to Heather's house at 10:57 p.m. However, the camera's distance from the house and the darkness hindered visibility. The car's headlights provided the only clues, revealing that the vehicle had backed into the driveway and remained stationary for some time. 11 minutes later, at 11:08 p.m., the headlights flickered back to life, and the driver departed the scene. Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner, the 2 men who found Heather's body, were taken to the police station for questioning. Dan, who had been friends with Heather, was the first to be interrogated. He explained that when he learned Heather was missing, he went to her house to check on her. Dan admitted that he had to push the door hard to gain entry, and as a result, the police asked him to provide DNA samples. He consented, and a swab was taken from his mouth. After that, he was released. Next, the investigators questioned Thomas Hansen. He revealed that he had spoken to Heather over the phone the previous night and was near her house around 11 p.m. According to Thomas, he drove up to Heather's house, but didn't enter. They chatted briefly outside, and then he drove home. This information helped the investigators identify the car seen on the CCTV footage as belonging to Thomas. Thomas also claimed that he didn't enter Heather's house that night because she wasn't alone. There was a man, known to him as Josh, inside with her. Hansen's statement echoed Reiner's. He claimed that upon learning of Heather's disappearance, he rushed to her house to investigate. After providing a DNA sample, he was released by the police. The police shifted their focus to Josh, who was at Heather's house shortly before her death. They quickly determined his whereabouts and brought him in for questioning. Josh acknowledged having known Heather for several years. He confessed to being at her house that night, stating that they watched TV while the kids slept in their room. He also mentioned visiting the store to buy breakfast for the children, returning to the house and staying for a while before a friend picked him up around 1 a.m. Notably, Josh admitted to having consensual, intimate contact with Heather. The investigators visited the store where Josh claimed to have purchased breakfast for the kids and reviewed the CCTV footage. The footage confirmed Josh's alibi, showing him entering the store at 11:20 p.m. However, this did not rule out the possibility that he was involved in the crime. As the last known person to have contact with Heather, Josh remained the prime suspect. Josh also provided a DNA sample, which was analyzed, along with those of Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner. The lab results cleared Hansen and Reiner, as their DNA did not match the DNA found on the victims' bodies. Josh's DNA, on the other hand, matched the DNA found on Heather's body, but not on her children's bodies. This indicated that there was another man present in the house that night. Josh had previously confessed to being in a romantic relationship with Heather, which accounted for his DNA being present on her body. However, the police were now tasked with identifying a different individual whose DNA matched the DNA found on the bodies of all three victims. The investigators quickly ruled out Heather's husband Wayne, who was in the process of divorcing her, as a suspect because he lived in a different state. The detectives then focused on Heather's cell phone records, hoping to find some answers. Upon receiving the report, they discovered that Heather had been very active on her phone, right up until the night of her death. Her last phone conversation took place at 3:12 a.m. and lasted 30 seconds. The police now needed to identify the owner of the phone number she had called. 36 hours after Heather's death, the police obtained additional CCTV footage. While analyzing it, the investigators noticed a white car pulling up to her house at around 3 a.m. This coincided with the time Heather stopped using her phone, which might not have been a coincidence. The officers also saw that the white car drove away about an hour later, around the time when Heather, Selena, and Wayne were likely already dead. Although the footage quality was poor and didn't allow the police to see the license plates, they were able to determine that the car was a Cadillac. Once the investigators received information from the phone company about the owner of the phone number Heather had called, they had a lead. The number belonged to 41-year-old Curtis Clinton. It was with him that Heather had her 30-second phone conversation at 3:12 a.m. Curtis Clinton's background check revealed alarming details. Police records showed that Clinton was released from prison in February after serving a 13-year sentence for 2 counts of felonious assault and involuntary manslaughter. He had pleaded guilty to the 1997 murder of 18-year-old Misty Keckler from Fostoria, who was found strangled, naked, and bound in a bathtub. The similarity to Heather's case, combined with the fact that Clinton was released from prison just 6 months prior to Heather and her children's death, raised concerns among investigators. It seemed possible that Clinton had reverted to his previous violent behavior. Furthermore, Clinton owned a white Cadillac, which made him the prime suspect. The police urgently needed to locate him to prevent any further harm. If Clinton was indeed responsible for the murders, he had to be stopped before he could harm anyone else. The police went to Clinton's last known address, but he was not there. A few hours later, a patrol officer found a white Cadillac on a nearby street, but Clinton himself was still missing. A search of the vehicle revealed a receipt from a gas station on the night of the crime. The investigators headed to the gas station to review the CCTV footage. On the recordings, they identified Clinton and his distinctive white Cadillac. Despite already knowing that Heather and her children were deceased, Clinton was seen purchasing water and beer, displaying a calm demeanor. Fearing Clinton might flee, the investigators nonetheless soon received a tip that a patient named Curtis Clinton had been admitted to a local hospital. They swiftly arrived at the hospital and apprehended the suspect they were pursuing. Clinton was arrested and taken into custody, but he vehemently denied any involvement in the tragic deaths of Heather Jackson and her children. During questioning, Clinton revealed that he had been in a romantic relationship with Heather for 5 months, providing her with both financial and emotional support to cope with her numerous personal issues. Clinton claimed to have limited knowledge of Heather's children and stated that he last saw Heather on Tuesday, September 6th. He alleged that on that day, he gave her $328, and they engaged in an intimate encounter. The investigator told Clinton that phone records revealed a 3:12 a.m. call with Heather on September 8th. Clinton corrected himself, saying he had gotten his days wrong, and it was actually Friday night or early Saturday morning when he last saw Heather, not Thursday night. According to Clinton, he didn't stay at her house for long, dropping off the money and engaging in intimate contact before leaving. He explained, "I did my thing and left, but couldn't recall what time he got home." Clinton claimed that someone else must have gone to Heather's house after he left. He said that while he was with Heather, she mentioned that somebody had texted or called her, and she seemed irritated. When informed that he was the last person who had contact with Heather, Clinton denied. However, the examination indicated the opposite. The DNA on the bodies of all 3 victims belonged to Curtis Clinton. Therefore, he was arrested and placed in the county jail. Curtis Clinton was charged with multiple counts during the investigation. It also turned out that 6 days before the death of Heather and her children, Curtis Clinton attacked a 17-year-old girl whose identity was not disclosed by the police. He choked her and forced her to have intimate contact with him. When he let her go, she went to the hospital, and the police at the hospital doctors took DNA samples from her body, which also led to Curtis Clinton. Clinton moved for a change of venue, arguing that extensive media coverage had saturated the county at the time of the offenses, and was likely to resume once the trial started. The trial court denied the motion for a change of venue, stating that while the pre-trial publicity was extensive and adverse to the defendant, the publicity was not sufficiently prejudicial that readers and viewers could not realistically shut it from sight. The court rejected claims of presumed prejudice, stating that the defendant, Curtis Clinton, did not hesitate to take the lives of Heather, Selena, and Wayne, and that his DNA was found inside Selena's body before she died. Clinton knew he was facing the death penalty, but he did not want to die and therefore did everything to achieve a different outcome in the trial. He even remembered what justice was when allowed to speak before being sentenced for the capital crimes. Clinton neither begged for his life nor apologized to the victim's family. Instead, he lashed out at the prosecutor, Kevin Baxter, and vowed he would win on appeal and have his case retried. He stated, "I don't respect the prosecutor, and as I said, I will be back again." I know there's a lot of people who are upset here, but I'm the one who's going through this." This statement triggered a disgusted response from some of the 70 people present at the hearing in November 2013. Curtis Clinton was given the death penalty for the murders of Heather Jackson and her 2 young children. When he learned he would be executed by lethal injection, Clinton became violent towards Heather's brother, who expressed a preference for Clinton to die in prison at the hands of other inmates. Deputies and court staff restrained Clinton, who was handcuffed, and pushed him into a chair, while other officers restrained Heather's brother as they exchanged profanities in a packed Erie County courtroom. Heather's brother was angry, stating that the only thing Clinton should be grateful for is that his life was spared by being placed on death row, and that he wished Clinton had been given a life sentence in prison, allowing his friends to harm him. The judge also sentenced Clinton to life in prison without parole for the murder of 3-year-old Selena, and an additional 10 years in prison for assaulting a 17-year-old girl 6 days before the murder of Heather and her children. In 2018, the Ohio Supreme Court postponed Curtis Clinton's execution, which was scheduled for September 15, 2021, pending the exhaustion of all state post-conviction proceedings, including any appeals. As of now, Curtis Clinton remains on death row, and his sentence has been upheld, but his execution will not take place in the near future. Ohio is currently holding over 100 inmates on death row, but Governor Mike DeWine is doubtful that any of them will be executed in the remaining 3 years of his term. The last execution in the state took place on July 18, 2018, and since then, Ohio has had an effective halt on capital punishment. According to Governor DeWine, the reason for this is that lethal injection is the only approved method of execution in Ohio. But pharmaceutical companies have threatened to retaliate if the state uses their products for this purpose. This would have a significant impact on the state's health department and other agencies. The governor has told the state legislature that the only way to resume executions is to change the law to permit alternative methods of execution. But so far, the legislature has not taken any action, and DeWine does not expect them to do so. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jirish. On November 30th, 2003, Shuba, a 27-year-old law student, became engaged to Jirish, a software engineer. Her father, a respected lawyer in Bengaluru, had a stellar reputation in the legal community. As his daughter grew older, he worried about her marital prospects. Consequently, he arranged her marriage to Jirish, a suitable match with a good job at a prominent multinational company. The two families had known each other for years, which further solidified the union. Confident that Jirish would provide a secure future for his daughter, Shuba's father gave his blessing for the engagement, set to take place on November 30th, 2003, with a wedding planned for April 2004. However, 3 days after the engagement, on December 3rd, 2003, Shuba suggested they celebrate with dinner at a restaurant that evening. Jirish was thrilled, as this was the first time his fiancée had taken the initiative to plan a night out. Before dinner, Jirish took Shuba to his office to introduce her to his colleagues. Afterwards, they headed to a restaurant on Old Airport Road for dinner. After the meal, around 9:30 p.m., Jirish and Shuba began their journey home. But on the way, Shuba asked Jirish to stop near the airport's landing strip so they could watch the planes take off and land. Jirish agreed, parking his scooter to the side, and they stood together, enjoying the planes and each other's company. Suddenly, 3 boys on motorcycles appeared, attacking Jirish. Shuba was left alone to face the 3 armed boys, and she desperately shouted for help. Unfortunately, they were alone at that moment, and the 3 boys brutally beat Jirish before fleeing. Shuba persisted in shouting for help, and her cries were fortunately heard by a passing car driver who stopped to assist her and Jirish. With great effort, both the car owner and Shuba managed to get Jirish into their vehicle and drive him to a nearby hospital. The doctor admitted Girish and immediately began his treatment. Meanwhile, Shuba notified both her and Girish's families about the accident, and within a short time, both families arrived at the hospital. Despite the doctor's best efforts throughout the night, they were ultimately unable to save Girish, and on December 4th, they pronounced him deceased. Since this was a clear-cut case of murder, Girish's father rushed to the nearby police station that same day. He recounted to the police how his son and his fiancée had gone out for dinner the previous night, and how, while they were standing at a landing spot near the airport, Girish was attacked, ultimately leading to his death. The police promptly took over the case and began their investigation by questioning Shuba, the sole eyewitness to Girish's murder. Given her distress, she had been inconsolable since learning of Girish's death. The police approached her gently. However, Shuba's account matched the one Girish's father had already provided, prompting the police to launch a thorough probe of both the crime scene and Girish's background. They even explored the possibility that Girish had personal enemies, but their efforts yielded no concrete leads to crack the case. According to reports, the police were unable to find any CCTV footage in the area, which was largely deserted and lacked residential cameras at the time. Consequently, the investigators turned to Girish and Shuba's engagement video as a potential source of leads. Their motive was to investigate whether someone close to Girish might have been involved in his murder, given that only their families were aware of the couple's trip. The investigative officer meticulously examined the engagement video, focusing on the behavior of their families and relatives. However, no suspicious behavior was detected among them. Undeterred, the officer re-watched the video, this time concentrating on Girish and Shuba's neighbors and other guests in attendance. Unfortunately, this effort also yielded no positive results. In the midst of the investigation, the officer took note of Shuba's facial expressions. Unlike what one would expect, she didn't seem happy and was making an effort to keep her distance from Girish. Initially, the officer had focused on the behavior and expressions of Girish and Shuba's relatives, almost neglecting Shuba herself. But after seeing Shuba's unhappy expressions and attempts to distance herself from Girish in a brief clip, he decided to review the entire engagement video again. Upon re-examining the video, the officer observed that during the ring ceremony, Shuba looked visibly sad while sitting with Girish and was consistently trying to create space between them. This struck the investigating officer as unusual, as newly engaged couples are typically ecstatic. Shuba's evident unhappiness raised his suspicions, but he also recognized that relying solely on a video wasn't enough to take action against her. Therefore, he decided to investigate Shuba's call records. Although it was unusual for the police to use this technology in 2003, as it was still relatively new in India at the time, the officer's interest in technology led him to pursue this avenue. In fact, mobile phones were a rarity in India back then, but Shuba's wealthy family had made it possible for her to own one. Upon obtaining her call records, it was revealed that on December 3rd, Shuba had made repeated calls to a single number. The police then traced the number back to a boy named Arun Verma. The police then delved deeper to uncover who Arun Verma was and what his connection to Shuba was. They soon discovered that both Arun and Shuba attended the same college, with Shuba being 2 years his senior. This new information prompted the officer to track their locations on December 3rd. Shuba's location was found near the airport, as she was with Girish. However, when tracing Arun's location, the police found that he was also near the airport, following Shuba to every location she visited. This heightened the police's suspicion, and they subsequently tracked down Arun Verma and summoned him to the police station for questioning. When the police questioned Arun about his whereabouts on December 3rd, he claimed to have been out of town for work. The instant he made this statement, the investigative officer was convinced that Arun was lying and would never admit the truth if asked directly. so they released him, but secretly tapped his phone beforehand. The officer suspected that Aaron and Shuba might be involved in Girish's death. However, they couldn't present them as guilty in court based solely on their alibis and call records from that day. Therefore, they put Aaron's phone under surveillance, believing that if he was involved in the murder, he would eventually incriminate himself. Upon returning home from the police station, Aaron's first call was to Shuba. Over the phone, Aaron informed Shuba that the police had questioned him about Girish's death. Shuba asked if he had disclosed anything to the police. Aaron reassured her that he had kept quiet and successfully misled the police, telling them he was out of town on December 3rd. When the police heard the recording, their suspicions were fully corroborated, leading to the immediate arrest of Aaron and Shuba. At the station, the police presented them with the call recording, call detail records, and location history. Initially, both attempted to deceive the police, but eventually, Aaron's nerve failed, and he confessed to the police that they had indeed murdered Girish. The unfolding story stunned everyone. The 19-year-old Aaron and 27-year-old Shuba had been secretly involved for the past 2 years. It was astonishing to learn that Aaron, still in his teenage years, was deeply in love with a woman 7 years his senior. Reports suggest that Shuba also desired to marry Aaron, but their dream remained unrealized. Shuba's father discovered their secret relationship and disapproved of Aaron, who was significantly younger than Shuba. As a result, he hastily arranged Shuba's engagement to Girish, which took place on November 30th. However, Shuba was unhappy with this arrangement. Despite Girish being educated and financially stable, Shuba found his simplicity and modest lifestyle unappealing and felt he wasn't a suitable match for her. During the investigation, it emerged that Shuba had confided in her beautician at the time of her engagement, revealing her intention to either flee before the wedding or harm Girish. Coerced into the engagement by her father, Shuba had now devised a plan with Aaron to eliminate Girish. This explained her repeated calls to Aaron, who agreed to carry out her plan. With the help of his cousin Dinesh, Aaron hired a local thug named Vinat. Shuba planned to lure Girish out of the house on December 3rd, pretending to take him out for dinner. On their way back, she would take him to a secluded spot near the airport's landing strip, where it would be easy to carry out the murder. According to this plan, on December 3rd, after dinner, Shuba expressed her desire to watch airplanes take off. He agreed to his fiancée's request, and they proceeded to the landing spot. Throughout their journey, Shuba kept Aaron informed about her location through regular calls and messages. Shortly after, Aaron, Dinesh, and Venkatesa arrived at the flight landing spot. Dinesh and Venkatesa then launched a brutal attack on Girish, striking him on the head with an iron rod. Girish collapsed instantly, bleeding profusely from his head injury and losing consciousness. Once the four were convinced that Girish was on the brink of death, Aaron and his companions fled the scene, abandoning the iron rod in the nearby bushes. After a significant period following Girish's injury, Shuba sought help, and the rest of the story unfolded. Despite this, Girish's killers managed to evade the police for nearly 50 days until Shuba and her accomplices were arrested on January 25, 2004, when the motive behind Girish's murder and the identities of his killers were finally revealed. The news of the incident spread rapidly throughout the state media. The police gathered all the evidence, interviewed witnesses, and prepared their case file, which was then presented in court. Although the case languished in the regular court for a lengthy period, it was eventually transferred to a fast-track court. Even in the fast-track court, the trial continued from 2007 to 2010. In May 2010, the fast-track court sentenced Shuba, Aaron, and their companions to life imprisonment. However, in July 2010, Shuba filed a bail application with the Karnataka High Court, which upheld the lower court's decision and rejected her bail plea. With no other option, Shuba then filed her bail application with the Supreme Court in August 2014. and the Supreme Court granted her bail for a limited period. The investigative officer who cracked this murder case by reviewing a video recording of the incident deserves appreciation. However, if Shuba had mustered the courage to confide in her father that she didn't like Girish and wouldn't be happy with him in her life, perhaps Girish would be alive today. Even if Shuba had shared her concerns with Girish, maybe he could have persuaded her father. The tragic irony of this story is that by the time Girish's killers were sentenced to life imprisonment, Girish's father had already passed away, leaving no one to find closure. With that, the Girish murder case finally comes to a close. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rebecca Bliefnick. Rebecca and Tim, who met at Quincy University, were the epitome of a perfect couple. Rebecca was a biology major and a tennis player, while Tim was a star football player. 2 years after graduating, the practical couple decided to tie the knot. Instead of splurging on an engagement ring and a lavish honeymoon, they chose to save their money. Although Rebecca had a genuine interest in medicine and had dreamed of becoming a doctor, she decided to pursue motherhood instead. Her dream came true when she and Tim had 3 sons. Tim was known for his charisma and ability to entertain. In 2008, he auditioned for American Gladiators, making it to the final round. Years later, in 2019, he received an invitation from the producers of Family Feud to participate in the show with his family. Rebecca's nursing school commitments prevented her from joining Tim on the TV show Family Feud. Undeterred, Tim assembled a team of family members, including his parents and brothers. The show's format features 2 teams competing to guess the most popular responses to survey questions from 100 people. Despite being unprepared, Tim's team performed well, earning points and ranking second on the scoreboard. They went on to participate in 3 episodes, winning a total of $20,000, which was divided equally among the family members. However, Tim did not share any of the winnings with his wife Rebecca. This decision highlights the strain on Tim and Rebecca's marriage, which began when Rebecca pursued a nursing career against Tim's wishes. Tim had expressed concerns about Rebecca's well-being and ability to manage stress, but Rebecca's friends believed Tim was opposed to her independence and autonomy. Rebecca's friends noticed that she was becoming increasingly unhappy in her marriage over time. At first, her marriage to Tim was relatively happy for about 5 years, but then Tim started to become more controlling and manipulative. Despite Rebecca's hard work in her nursing studies and job, Tim didn't pull his weight at home, leaving Rebecca to handle most of the responsibilities. Rebecca realized that their marriage was struggling and wanted to fix it, so she suggested that they go to marriage counseling together. She believed that counseling could help them find solutions and improve their relationship. However, Tim refused to go, despite Rebecca's efforts to save their marriage. In January 2021, after 11 years of marriage, Tim suddenly filed for divorce, which caught Rebecca off guard. She had been committed to working through their issues, but Tim had already made up his mind. He moved out of their family home and into a new house across town, leaving Rebecca to pick up the pieces. Tim and Rebecca's divorce was extremely contentious. They were unable to agree on anything, and their communication broke down completely. The couple disputed several issues, including who would get custody of the children, how they would divide their property, and how much alimony one would pay the other. Things escalated to the point where Tim felt threatened and applied for a court order to protect himself from Rebecca, alleging that she was stalking and harassing him. Rebecca had a different view of the situation, accusing Tim of harassment. She shared her concerns with friends through text messages, describing incidents where Tim yelled at her, pushed her in front of their sons, and threw things. Rebecca feared Tim might do something drastic to take her children away, which alarmed her sister, who knew Rebecca's fears were valid and that she needed help to protect herself. Rebecca then filed for an order of protection against Tim, claiming he entered her home without permission and lied about their interactions. However, the judge denied both Rebecca and Tim's requests, instead ordering them to stay away from each other's homes, except during child custody exchanges. In February 2023, Tim told the police he wouldn't return a gun, calling Rebecca a derogatory name. At the time, Rebecca and Tim's 3 sons, aged 12, 10, and 5, were staying with Tim at his home, just a mile from Rebecca's residence. Their divorce was set to be finalized in just 1 week. Tim contacted Rebecca's father the next day, worried because he couldn't reach Rebecca, and she had failed to pick up the boys from school as planned. Given Rebecca's dedication as a mother, her father suspected something was seriously wrong. Concerned for Rebecca's safety, her father rushed to her house. When he arrived, he entered the house, calling out to Rebecca, but received no response. He went upstairs to her bedroom, where he found a disturbing scene. Rebecca lay on her back, covered in blood and gunshot wounds. After Rebecca's father discovered her body in the bathroom, detectives and forensic experts arrived at the house. They began by carefully examining the outside of the property, searching for clues. Their investigation revealed that the suspect had probably entered the house by forcing open an upstairs window in one of the children's bedrooms. The discovery led investigators to believe that the suspect used a patio chair to gain access to the house and climb up to the roof. By retracing the suspect's likely path, they went to Rebecca's bedroom, where they found the door had been violently kicked in or broken. The state of the door suggested to investigators that the suspect had forcibly entered the room, probably in search of Rebecca. Evidence indicated that Rebecca had tried to barricade herself in the bathroom, but the suspect had pursued her and caught up. Ultimately, the suspect shot Rebecca inside the bathroom. During their search of the bathroom where Rebecca's body was found, investigators stumbled upon her cell phone. Upon examining Rebecca's phone, investigators found a 911 call dialed at 1:11 a.m. This led them to form a theory about the events of that night. They believed that as the suspect chased Rebecca through the house, she tried to call for help, but accidentally dialed a wrong number before she could try calling 911 again. The misdialed call at 1:11 a.m. suggested to investigators that the suspect had knocked the phone out of Rebecca's hand. They believed Rebecca was likely killed around this time. However, when police questioned Rebecca's neighbors, none of them remembered hearing any noise around 1:11 a.m., which raised suspicions among the investigators. A thorough search of Rebecca's house revealed that her murder was not a botched burglary, as nothing was stolen. Despite this, the perpetrator left behind significant evidence. One notable discovery was a partial shoe print found near the point where the suspect entered the house. The shoe print discovered at the crime scene could be crucial in identifying the type of shoe worn by the suspect, including its make and model, as well as providing details about the size and shape of their feet. The presence of 8 9mm shell casings and small pieces of shredded plastic near Rebecca's body also provide significant leads for the investigators. Despite collecting these key pieces of evidence, the investigators were unsure how to interpret their findings. To gain more insight, they decided to send the evidence to forensic laboratories for further analysis. Specifically, they wanted to determine if any of Rebecca's personal belongings matched the evidence found at the crime scene. The investigation began when Rebecca's father found her lifeless body in the bathroom of her home. Upon arriving at the scene, investigators carefully examined the exterior of the house, leading them to identify how the perpetrator gained entry by prying open an upstairs window in one of the children's bedrooms. Here's what likely happened. The suspect used a patio chair to climb up to the roof and entered the house. The investigators retraced the suspect's steps and found that the bedroom door had been violently kicked in or broken, suggesting the suspect had forced their way in, probably looking for Rebecca. It seems Rebecca tried to barricade herself in the bathroom, but the suspect caught up with her. Unfortunately, the suspect shot and killed Rebecca in the bathroom. The investigators found Rebecca's phone near her body and examined it. They discovered that she had dialed 911, but mistakenly entered an extra digit, 91126, at 1:11 a.m. This discovery helped the investigators piece together the events. They believe Rebecca was desperately trying to call for help as the suspect chased her through the house, but she accidentally dialed the wrong number. Before she could try calling 911 again, the suspect likely knocked the phone out of her hand. The timing of the misdialed call at 1:11 a.m. led investigators to believe that Rebecca's murder likely occurred around that time. However, when they questioned Rebecca's neighbors, none of them reported hearing any suspicious noises, which was surprising given the fact that she had suffered multiple gunshot wounds. A thorough search of Rebecca's house revealed that her murder was not the result of a burglary gone wrong, as nothing was stolen. Despite this, the perpetrator left behind a significant amount of evidence. One crucial discovery was a partial shoe print near the point of entry, which could help identify the brand and model of the shoe, as well as the size and shape of the suspect's foot. The crime scene also yielded 8 9mm shell casings, and small pieces of shredded plastic were found scattered near Rebecca's body. After gathering all the evidence, the investigators were unsure what to make of their findings, so they decided to send the CED evidence to forensic laboratories for further analysis. The detectives wanted to determine if any of the evidence found at the crime scene matched Rebecca's belongings. A neighbor had installed a security camera on the side of their house after their car was broken into a year earlier. The camera was directed towards the neighbor's driveway, which shared a boundary with Rebecca's home, and was set to turn on and alert the neighbor whenever it detected movement. Although the camera didn't capture anything significant on the night of Rebecca's death, it did record something unusual the previous day at 1:05 a.m. The footage showed a person walking down the driveway towards the back of Rebecca's house, a potentially crucial discovery in the case. About 48 minutes after the initial sighting, the same individual was seen walking in the opposite direction. Interestingly, Rebecca's neighbor had captured a similar incident on their camera about a week prior, on February 14th. After reviewing their security footage, Rebecca's neighbors noticed a suspicious dark-clad figure lurking around her house on Valentine's Day, prompting them to alert her immediately. Upon learning about the mysterious figure, Rebecca became increasingly paranoid. Although she claimed not to have seen anyone on her property, she had heard unsettling voices in her backyard the previous night, which frightened her. Based on the security camera footage, the police expanded their search to neighboring houses to gather more evidence of the dark-clad individual. Their search led them to a house near the Quinney bus barn, where they found footage of a person riding a bike, dressed in dark clothing, heading towards Rebecca's house. These videos confirmed the description of the mysterious person seen in the original driveway footage, providing a clear consistency in the suspect's appearance. After analyzing the recorded times of the videos, detectives suspected that the person on the bike was the same individual seen in Rebecca's driveway footage. Although Rebecca's neighbor's security camera didn't capture footage of the mysterious person on the night of her murder, officers found footage of someone on a bike riding towards Rebecca's house just before and after the incident. This person matched the description of the individual seen lurking in Rebecca's driveway in the days leading up to her murder. While the video evidence was helpful in the investigation, its poor quality limited the information it provided. The detectives couldn't identify the person in the video due to the grainy image, making it difficult to determine their gender. However, they did notice one distinctive feature. The bike had no reflectors on its wheels. When Rebecca's sister heard that she was murdered, only one person came to mind as a suspect: Rebecca's estranged husband, Tim. Rebecca's sister, who had a first-hand account of the contentious divorce between Rebecca and Tim, shared this information with the detectives working on her sister's case. The detectives suspected Tim of murdering Rebecca, especially since her murder happened just a week before their divorce was due to be finalized. During the investigation, they made a crucial discovery: a bike with no reflectors on its wheels, similar to the one seen on security footage, was found just a block from Tim's house. This discovery increased the suspicion surrounding Tim, leading the detectives to obtain a search warrant for his home. When the police executed the warrant, Tim cooperated fully, standing outside his home with the officers as they searched his belongings. On March 13, 2023, 2 weeks after Rebecca's murder, Tim was arrested and charged with her murder. When his mugshot was released, Rebecca's family and friends were shocked by his appearance, which was very different from the clean-cut man they had known. Tim's friends and family were shocked by his disheveled appearance, which they attributed to the emotional toll of his recent divorce. His once neat and tidy hair was now unkempt, and his clothes were messy. They speculated that the divorce had affected not only his physical appearance, but also his mental well-being. However, Tim had a surprising explanation for his changed look. He revealed that he was growing his hair out to support a charity campaign for cancer research. Despite this, a viral video clip showed Tim's appearance on Family Feud, where he made a bizarre statement about regretting his marriage, which took on a disturbing tone after he was arrested for murdering his wife. Many people believed that Tim's comment on Family Feud was a strange and unsettling prediction of what would eventually happen. They thought it showed that he had hidden feelings about his wife and was a sign that something bad was happening in their relationship. When the police looked into Tim's phone, they found that he had made a fake Facebook account under the name John Smith. During their investigation, they discovered that Tim had been searching for a specific type of bicycle on Facebook, a blue Schwinn bike with no reflectors on the wheels. This was an important discovery because it matched the description of a bike that was found abandoned just 1 block away from Tim's house. Despite having strong evidence against Tim, the detectives faced a significant obstacle when they arrested him. Tim was held in jail without the possibility of bail, but he requested a quick trial, which is his right under the law. Prosecutors were required to bring the matter to trial within 90 days of Tim's arrest. The prosecution faced a significant challenge in convincing a jury, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Tim murdered Rebecca due to the absence of a confession or DNA evidence. Juries typically look for these 2 key elements in criminal cases. To prove Tim's guilt in the murder of his wife Rebecca, the prosecution faced a significant challenge. Exactly 3 months after Rebecca's tragic murder in her home, Tim's trial began on May 23, 2023. During the trial, the prosecution presented several key pieces of evidence found at the crime scene. One notable piece of evidence was the shredded plastic fragments discovered around Rebecca's body. The prosecution argued that these fragments came from an Owl's grocery bag. Further investigation revealed that similar bags were found in Tim's house. The prosecution alleged that Tim used these bags as a makeshift silencer when he shot his estranged wife multiple times. They claimed that the bags were used to muffle the sound of the gunfire, preventing it from being heard by others. The prosecution also presented DNA evidence, suggesting that Tim left behind DNA while using the Aldi bags. An expert testified that it was highly likely Tim contributed to the DNA found, and that his DNA could not be ruled out as a match for the DNA found under Rebecca's fingernails. The prosecution presented evidence suggesting that a crowbar found in Tim's basement might have been used to force open the window at the victim's house on the night of the murder. Although an expert testified that there were microscopic similarities between the crowbar and the window's pry mark, she couldn't conclusively say that the crowbar was involved. To build a stronger case, the prosecution presented records of several searches made on Tim's phone, including how to open my door with a crowbar, how to make a homemade pistol silencer, how to clean gunpowder off your hands, and average police response time in Quinney. The prosecution's expert witness testified that she compared the shell casings found at the crime scene to those found at Tim's house during the investigation. Her analysis revealed that 27 of the casings from Tim's home were fired from the same 9mm weapon used to kill Rebecca. When investigators searched Tim's house, they didn't find Rebecca's 9mm gun, which he had refused to return to her. Tim claimed he hadn't seen the gun in months before Rebecca's murder. During the trial, the defense had the opportunity to call witnesses, but chose not to. After the 6-day trial, the jury took 4 hours to reach a guilty verdict, and Tim was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Despite claiming innocence and planning to appeal, Tim is behind bars, and Rebecca's family believes justice has been served. During the sentencing hearing, Rebecca's family read impact statements. One of her sisters addressed Tim, telling him how his actions affected his son's well-being. She stressed that his choices were causing his sons to suffer. Rebecca's sister vowed to keep her memory alive for her 3 sons, even after her passing. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Chad Durman. Chad Durman, a 32-year-old man from Claremont County, Ohio, was married to 34-year-old Laura. They had a blended family with 3 young sons, Hunter 4, Clayton 3, and Chase 7, and a teenage stepdaughter, Alexis 16. Laura stayed at home to care for the children while Chad worked to support the family. On June 15, 2023, Chad arrived home from work earlier than usual and suggested taking a nap with his family. He invited Laura and their 3 sons to join him in their bedroom, where they spent some time laughing and chatting together. However, this joyful moment would soon turn into a horrific tragedy. After a few minutes, Chad got up and opened the gun safe next to their bed. He retrieved a MAR model HC-22 rifle, loaded it, and shot his 4-year-old son Hunter twice. The sound of the gunshot was heard by Alexis, who was watching TV in the family room. She rushed to the bedroom to see what had happened. As Alexis reached the doorway, she was met with a horrific scene, her brother being shot. Overcome with terror, she turned and fled as fast as possible. Meanwhile, Laura, who was with her kids, rushed to help her son Hunter, who had been injured. She yelled at the other children to run for their lives. Alexis saw the eldest boy fleeing in the wrong direction, towards a field, and shouted at him to keep running. Chad, however, was hot on his heels, and soon shot his own 7-year-old son, Clayton. As Clayton fell to the ground, bleeding severely, Chad stood over him, seemingly triumphant. Alexis witnessed this horror and was paralyzed with fear. She then turned and ran back into the house, grabbed her youngest brother, and fled to safety, desperate to save their lives. Chad pursued her, caught up, and pointed his gun at her, demanding that she hand over the 3-year-old, Chase. Alexis begged and pleaded with Chad to spare her life, but he tried to shoot her in the head, only to find he had run out of bullets. Alexis took advantage of the reprieve and escaped to the nearby fire station, where she frantically stopped a passerby to get help. At 4:15 p.m., a girl called 911 to report that her stepfather had killed everyone in her house. The police arrived at the scene 10 minutes later, at 4:25 p.m., and found Chad sitting on the porch with a rifle beside him. They quickly arrested him and placed him in handcuffs. Despite the chaos, Chad remained calm and didn't resist arrest. Meanwhile, his stepdaughter Laura was taken to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center to receive treatment for her injuries. Fortunately, Chad's stepdaughter Alexis had managed to escape from the house earlier that day, avoiding the fate of her 3 brothers, who were tragically killed by her stepfather. Chad was officially arrested at 4:27 p.m. on June 15, 2023. When the police took Chad into custody, he showed no signs of distress or remorse, instead behaving politely as though nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. He was later taken to jail for further questioning and investigation. During the interrogation, Chad confessed to police that he had been planning the murders since October 2022. Chad told investigators that he had gone without sleep for 3 to 4 days because the idea of harming his own sons was too much to bear. This admission provided a disturbing glimpse into his state of mind in the days leading up to the tragedy. Investigators also looked into whether Chad had a history of aggressive behavior. Chad's phone records were reviewed as part of the investigation, which revealed that he had a history of traffic violations in Claremont County, with one exception, a criminal damage incident that occurred when he was 18 years old. Additionally, a 2010 domestic violence case was discovered, in which Chad was accused of choking his father, Keith Derman. However, the case was eventually dropped due to Keith Derman's failure to appear in court as a witness for the prosecution. These records provided valuable insight into Chad's legal history and past dealings with law enforcement in the county. Meanwhile, one of Chad's neighbors, Richard Kanan, told a news channel that Chad was angry on a daily basis. The woman who called 911 also gave an interview to the news channel, describing how she was running with her little black lab and frantically screaming, "Call 911! Call 911!" during the incident. Chad's property tax records show that he was up to date with his payments until 2023, suggesting that he was not experiencing financial difficulties with his mortgage. When questioned by detectives, his 59-year-old father, Keith Derman, was left stunned and struggling to come to terms with the news. "I'm still trying to understand," he said. Keith Derman expressed his disbelief that his son could commit such a heinous crime. He also hinted that Chad was struggling with personal issues that had become too much to handle. The community was deeply shocked by the news of the killings, with neighbors expressing their surprise and stating that they never would have expected such actions from Chad. Initially, Chad confessed to the crimes during his interrogation, pleading guilty to all charges. However, during his first court hearing on June 23, 2023, he changed his plea to not guilty. At a subsequent hearing on the same day, Chad appeared visibly distraught, wearing a green bulletproof vest and breaking down in tears as prosecutors detailed the horrific events of June 15. The judge described the case as an act of unimaginable cruelty. The father, who stands before the court, intentionally murdered his 3 young sons, aged 3, 4, and 7, in his own home using a rifle. The chief prosecutor revealed that Chad meticulously planned the events, reflecting a disturbing premeditation. One of his sons attempted to escape by running away in a nearby field, but Chad chased and caught the boy, dragging him back to the yard where he was subsequently killed alongside his brothers. The trauma inflicted by this man on his family, the community, law enforcement, first responders, and society at large is unfathomable. While there has been a full admission of guilt, the case is still unfolding, and the full extent of the facts is still being discovered. However, the sheer horror of what is known so far is almost impossible to comprehend. Chad's murder of his own sons is one of the most horrific, craven, and cowardly acts imaginable. According to the detailed bill of particulars filed in Claremont County, the judge was presented with a disturbing account of the events. The prosecutor read aloud the sequence of incidents that led to the tragedy. Chad deliberately planned and executed the killings, lining up his sons and shooting them. When their mother attempted to intervene, Chad shot her in the hand. The prosecutor revealed that Chad fired a total of 9 shots, causing devastating harm. One boy was hit once, while the other 2 were each struck 4 times. The prosecutor, Mark TL, emphasized the brutality of Chad's actions, stating that the brutal killings left the family and community in a state of shock. Prosecutor Mark Talvey revealed that Chad Dorman confessed to the murder, saying, "I did it. Take me to jail. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have shot them." During the interrogation, Chad also pleaded guilty. As a result, Talvey is seeking the death penalty. In a statement to the media after the court hearing, Talvey expressed his outrage, calling the crime the most sickening and horrifying he has seen. He imagined the terror the victims felt as their father, who was supposed to protect them, murdered them. Talvi vowed to do everything in his power to ensure Chad Dorman spends the rest of his life in prison. He began by offering his deepest sympathy to the family for their unspeakable tragedy. Chad Dorman is accused of committing a horrific act of violence against his own family, resulting in the tragic deaths of his 3 young sons, Hunter, Clayton, and Chase. He faces 21 charges, including 9 counts of aggravated murder, 8 counts of kidnapping, and 4 counts of felonious assault, which could lead to the death penalty if convicted. The grand jury has indicted Dorman on these charges, and he is currently being held in the Claremont County Jail with a bail set at $20 million, the highest in the county's history. Dorman's lawyer has entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming that he was suffering from a serious mental illness at the time of the killings. The lawyer argues that executing someone with a serious mental illness is cruel and unusual punishment, violating both the Ohio and U.S. constitutions. The prosecution has requested a mental evaluation, and a court date has been set for May 3, 2024, to discuss the lawyer's request. The defense has agreed to provide a report from a mental health expert by June 3, 2024, to support their claim. Meanwhile, a judge has ruled that Dorman's confession will be thrown out due to violations of his Miranda rights during police interrogation. The police failed to fully read him his rights and continued questioning him after he requested an attorney. Several witnesses, including police officers, have testified in court, describing their encounters with Dorman. One officer recalled that Dorman said, "Take me to jail," during the drive to the sheriff's office, while another officer remembered Dorman referencing the Bible during his interrogation, saying that he did not kill his wife. In this case, Chad expressed a desire for a lawyer during the interrogation, but the detective ignored him. When a suspect clearly requests a lawyer during a custodial interrogation, it's not the start of a test, but rather a signal for the officer to stop questioning them. However, Detective Ross failed to cease the questioning and even left Chad alone for a while, before returning to continue the interrogation. During the court hearing, it was revealed that Detective Ross did not read Chad his full Miranda rights. When questioned about this, Ross admitted to not reading the rights verbatim, but claimed to have covered the most important parts. However, it was established that Ross had omitted crucial parts of the rights. Ultimately, the judge ruled that the investigators failed to follow proper procedures during Chad's arrest in June 2023, violating his Miranda rights. Chad's lawyers argued that during his 3-hour interrogation, Chad requested a lawyer at least twice, but the detectives disregarded his request and continued questioning him. Additionally, they claimed that Chad's earlier guilty plea was a result of intimidation by the investigators. The judge later ruled that the detectives failed to fully inform Chad of his rights before the interrogation. Thus, any statements made during that time would be inadmissible as evidence in future court proceedings. This ruling significantly impacted the trial, limiting the evidence that could be presented against Chad. The legal complexities and public interest in the case increased, with Chad facing a potential death penalty if convicted. His trial is scheduled to begin on July 8, 2024, but the recent ruling may change the course of the trial. A final court hearing is set for June 14th, just before the anniversary of the tragic events. The trial is expected to last from July 8th to August 2nd. However, the authorities are still unsure about the motive behind Chad's actions. The motive behind Chad's shooting of Clayton, Hunter, and Chase remains unknown, but some people believe it may have been an act of revenge against his 34-year-old wife, whom he suspected of infidelity. However, this motive has not been officially confirmed. Meanwhile, a memorial ride was held today to raise funds for the Dorman boys' family, with hundreds of people participating in the 15-mile ride through New Richmond. The event, which featured motorcycles, jeeps, and cars, attracted over 100 participants and was organized by Alan Easterday. The community came together to show their support for the family during this difficult time, while the boy's father awaits trial for their murder. The accused, Chad Derman, is being held in custody at Claremont County Jail as the legal case against him continues. Many questions still linger, including what motivated him to commit such a heinous act against his own children. While the community is still searching for answers, they are holding on to hope that justice will be served and the truth will eventually come to light. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Savannah Greywind. Savannah Greywind was born on August 9, 1995, in Burke County, North Dakota. Savannah had two brothers, Joe and Casey, and a younger sister, Kayla. Her parents, Norberta and Joe, took great pride in their children. The family resided in Fargo, North Dakota, until Savannah was 9 years old, then relocated to the Spirit Lake Reservation in 2005. Growing up on the Spirit Lake Reservation, a Native American community in eastern North Dakota, Savannah developed a deep appreciation for nature and animals, particularly horses. It was there that she met Ashton Matheny when she was 15 years old, and they have remained together ever since. When it was time for Savannah and Ashton to pursue higher education, the family moved back to Fargo. Savannah secured a job at a nursing home caring for the elderly, began studying to become a nurse, and was preparing to take her certification exam in September. At this point in her life, Savannah was a happy young woman expecting her first child. She and Ashton had found an apartment, paid a deposit, and planned to move into their own home in early September. Meanwhile, Savannah was living with her parents in a basement apartment of a 7-unit, 3-story building. Unbeknownst to her, Brooke Cruz, 38, and William Hone, 33, rented an apartment on the 3rd floor of the same building. Brooke Lynn Crew grew up in a neighborhood in Bradenton, Sarasota, Florida. Her parents divorced when she was young, leaving Brooke and her 6 siblings to live with their mother. According to her sister, the family had a relatively comfortable life. Brooke underwent significant changes during her teenage years, transforming from a caring girl to a troubled teen. She was shuffled between foster homes, losing contact with her siblings. Brooke was imprisoned in Missouri in 2002 for falsifying documents, then arrested again for parole violation in Texas. She married Carl Crew, a carpenter from Minnesota, at 27, had 2 more children, and worked as an administrative assistant. The marriage ended in divorce in 2009, with the father granted custody of the children. Brooke kept diaries throughout her life, recording tumultuous relationships and self-doubt. Brooke believed Carl had emotionally traumatized her through bullying and belittling. Despite this, she took steps to move forward, studying psychology and joining a dating site, where she met Andrew Murray, a chef from Australia. She relocated to Australia in late 2011. In January 2012, Brooke had an argument with her ex-husband over child custody. The situation escalated, and Brooke allegedly attacked him with a knife, leading to her arrest. She fled to Australia using false documents and married Andrew, but their 6-month marriage ended when he discovered her past. After returning to the U.S., Brooke was involved in a custody battle for her children. She then met William Hone, a 28-year-old convicted of child abuse, and fell in love with him despite his concerning past. Brooke began taking steps towards a fresh start, including finding a job in 2013. Brooke turned her hobby into a profession by studying psychology at Minnesota State University. She developed a particular interest in the psychology of serial killers and wrote a well-received paper. However, her personal life struggled due to a codependent relationship with William, marked by excessive drinking and substance abuse. Despite her outward success, Brooke's mental health deteriorated, leading to withdrawal, strained relationships at work, and a job change. Her obsession with dark human psychology exacerbated her emotional turmoil. The situation culminated on December 23, 2014, when Brooke lost custody of her children and was hospitalized for a panic attack, receiving a PTSD diagnosis. In 2015, Brooke wrote about feeling drained in her relationship with William Hahn. She felt he no longer made an effort to be intimate, and their moments together were brief and unsatisfying. As time passed, Brooke became withdrawn and isolated, exacerbated by a gallbladder disease diagnosis. The situation escalated in 2016 when William brutally beat her, pleaded guilty to assault, and was ordered to stay away. The relationship had deteriorated to the point where there were no longer any healthy moments. A major issue was that Brooke had become unable to have children following an abortion in 2011. Despite this, her partner William continually pressured her to have a child. In an attempt to keep him from leaving, Brooke lied about being pregnant in early 2017, even going so far as to email him a fake ultrasound picture and a photo of a positive pregnancy test. To further convince William, Brooke found a recording of a random baby's heartbeat online and presented it as the heartbeat of their unborn child. However, by August 2017, it became clear that Brooke was not pregnant. William, having already announced the pregnancy to those around him, was unwilling to admit the truth and instead demanded that Brooke produce a child. With her medical knowledge, Brooke began compiling a list of items needed to induce labor, driven by her desire to appease William's demands. On a Saturday afternoon in August, Brooke visited Savannah at her downstairs apartment and offered her $20 to model a dress Brooke was supposedly making. Savannah agreed and, before heading upstairs to Brooke's apartment, ordered a pizza, expecting to eat it when she returned home an hour later. She had to drive her younger brother to work later that day. However, Savannah failed to return on time. Her brother went to Brooke's apartment around 2:30 p.m. and heard the sound of a sewing machine, but no one answered the door. A few minutes later, Savannah's father, Joe, also visited Brooke's apartment and knocked on the door. Brooke shouted that they were still working on the dress and that Savannah was trying it on, which was why she couldn't answer the door. As Savannah's mother, Norberta, returned home, she drove her son to work herself. She found the pizza untouched and tried to contact Savannah by text, but received no response. Norberta then visited Brooke's apartment, looking for her daughter. She noticed that Savannah's shoes, purse, car keys, and belongings were still in the apartment. Given Savannah's pregnancy and related discomfort, it was unlikely she would go for a walk. Norberta called Ashton, hoping he might have picked up Savannah, but he said he hadn't heard from her either. Later that day, the police searched Brooke and William's apartment, as it was Savannah's last known location. The landlord allowed them in and did not obstruct their search. However, since they didn't have a warrant, the police did not search closets or behind closed doors. The police department explained to the family that Savannah was an adult and capable of making her own decisions without informing her family. With no evidence of a crime having occurred in or near the home, investigators concluded that Savannah had left voluntarily. The family was upset by the police department's indifferent attitude towards the case. The police conducted 2 more searches of the apartment but found nothing. However, William would later admit that during one of the searches, he hid the baby in a suitcase and Savannah's body in a dresser with the shelves removed. 2 days after the murder, they disposed of the dresser containing Savannah's body by dumping it into the river from a bridge. On August 23, 2017, William's co-workers informed the police that he had mentioned having a baby at home. That same day, neighbors of the apartment building reported hearing a baby crying from apartment number 5 and immediately contacted the police. With this new information, the officers obtained a warrant and returned to the apartment for a more thorough search, during which they found a live newborn baby girl. Brooke revealed that Savannah herself had secretly given her the baby just 2 days after Savannah's disappearance. According to Brooke, Savannah had previously expressed that she did not want the baby. In fact, Savannah had visited Brooke earlier to ask how she could induce labor on her own. Then, in the early hours of the morning 2 days later, Savannah showed up at Brooke's doorstep with the baby and handed him over. Savannah was reported missing, and the baby was taken into temporary custody by Cass County Social Services. A DNA test later confirmed the baby's parentage, and he was reunited with his father for a short period. 8 days after her disappearance, a fisherman discovered a body wrapped in plastic on the Red River near Harwood. The body was identified as Savannah's through a tattoo on her leg that read, "Too beautiful for Earth." Subsequently, Brooke, Crew, and William were charged with conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to kidnap, and providing false information to the police. They eventually began to confess to their crimes. Brooke initiated a physical altercation with Savannah, who was pregnant, by accusing her of stealing and mistreating her cat. The confrontation escalated into a physical scuffle, during which Brooke pushed Savannah, causing her to hit her head on the bathroom sink and lose consciousness. Brooke then used a knife to make a cut from hip to hip, intentionally harming Savannah and her unborn baby. Savannah repeatedly lost and regained consciousness while Brooke did this. When questioned, Brooke admitted that William was not aware of the impending plan. According to Brooke, William came home, entered the bathroom, and saw Savannah's injured body. He asked if Savannah was alive, and Brooke replied that she didn't know. William then left the bathroom briefly and returned with a rope, which he used to strangle Savannah, ensuring her death. After the murder, Brooke and William cleaned the bathroom, scrubbing the floor and walls, and hid Savannah's body in a bathroom closet. When police officers arrived at the door, Brooke attempted to remain calm and composed. The officers searched the apartment but, lacking a search warrant, were unable to thoroughly inspect the premises, including closets and dressers. As a result, they did not find Savannah's body. The perpetrator stated that the child was lying under a blanket on their bed, next to William, during the searches that day. The child was calm and didn't cry, which is why they weren't discovered. However, by the third inspection on August 20th, the body had been moved and hidden in a dresser. Meanwhile, the infant was concealed in a suitcase. On the early morning of August 21st, the dresser was carried down the stairs, loaded into a Jeep Cherokee, and driven to a river, where it was disposed of. William denied participating in the crime but admitted to hiding the newborn baby girl and providing false information to law enforcement to cover up the crime. Brooke and William were set a $2 million bail, which William found unreasonable and unrealistic. Brooke Crew received a life sentence without parole. During the trial, William's involvement in the crime was not proven. However, Brooke's cellmate, Jennifer Robinson, testified against Brooke. According to Jennifer, Brooke claimed to have strangled Savannah with a rope after learning about Savannah's affair with William and suspecting that Savannah's child might be William's. On September 28, 2018, a jury acquitted William of conspiracy to commit murder. Nevertheless, on October 30, 2018, William was sentenced to life in prison for kidnapping, having pleaded guilty to the charge. The following spring, in May 2019, William appealed to the Supreme Court. After a sentencing review trial on October 7, 2019, Judge Olin stated that despite the Supreme Court's dissent, he would still impose the harshest possible sentence, which was 20 years in prison. Considering that William had already spent 775 days behind bars, he will have to serve more than 7 additional years of his 20-year sentence. Norberta believes her daughter Savannah's disappearance wasn't taken seriously because she's Native American. This sparked Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp to introduce Savannah's Law, signed in October 2020, to address violence against Native American women by improving collaboration between authorities. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Summer Baldwin. Summer Baldwin, born in 1976 in Washington, was renowned for her kind and vibrant personality. As a bright student with many friends, she aspired to pursue an acting career. Following high school, Summer enrolled in community college but struggled with her studies. Seeking a change of environment and new opportunities, she moved to Texas with her friends, supported by her parents who hoped she could start anew. However, it is uncertain when Summer's life started to decline. She struggled with addiction to alcohol and illicit drugs, but unfortunately did not reach out to her family for support. As her addiction worsened, she lost her job and began associating with people who had a history of crime. Her dreams of becoming an actress were shattered, and she was eventually forced to work as an escort to make ends meet. Summer's parents remained oblivious to their daughter's struggles, believing she was living a successful life. The information provided about Summer's friends was limited. However, a significant detail emerged. A few months before her death, Summer had been a key witness in a major federal counterfeiting case. This revelation suggested that her murder might have been a contract killing by a criminal gang, drawing the attention of the FBI and putting the investigation under intense scrutiny. The investigation led to the first suspects. Rebecca, Summer's best friend, was called in for questioning by the police. She provided insight into Summer's occupation and mentioned several of her boyfriends, one of whom had a history of aggressive behavior, including physical abuse and persistent stalking after their breakup. This man became the initial suspect in the case. Summer's ex-boyfriend was detained and brought to the station on the same day. However, he vehemently denied any involvement in the case and appeared genuinely surprised and distraught upon learning of Summer's death. Furthermore, he had a solid alibi for the night before the tragedy, having been involved in a drunken brawl at a bar and spending the night in a cell with another individual. As a result, the police were forced to release the first and, at the time, only suspect. Another friend and colleague of Summer named Marguerite provided crucial information to the investigation. Marguerite reported that she saw Summer on the evening of September 11th at a convenience store parking lot. They had a brief conversation. Marguerite recalled that a red van pulled into the parking lot, and a young, physically fit Latino man got out to enter the store, likely to make a purchase. While he was inside, Summer exited the van from the passenger side to greet Marguerite. Summer mentioned that the man was a client she had met for the second time in recent days. After the man returned to the van, he got behind the wheel, and Summer quickly re-entered the vehicle. Marguerite didn't notice which direction the van took when it left, nor did she know where Summer and the man were headed. She noted that she had never seen the man before and thought he was not from the area. Her description of him was limited due to the darkness, but she remembered that he had very short hair, similar to a military style. On September 13, 2005, a sanitation worker discovered a suspicious suitcase in a landfill in Lubbock City, Texas, USA. When he opened the suitcase, he was startled to see the body of a woman with red hair. The victim's body had many bruises. The victim's leg was tattooed with the word Summer. The suitcase, which tragically became her coffin, presented a peculiar appearance. Externally, it was covered in garbage and waste, yet surprisingly, it showed no signs of wear and tear, and its wheels appeared brand new. Upon closer inspection, the interior revealed perfectly intact tags and a lining that seemed untouched, giving the impression that the suitcase was brand new. Notably, the plastic attachment for the price tag remained intact, suggesting that the purchaser had not removed it. Further investigation revealed that this particular brand of suitcase was widely available in numerous stores throughout the city. However, this specific large model was only sold in 2 stores. A crucial breakthrough came when the perfectly preserved barcode led investigators to a Walmart store in the same area where Summer was last seen alive. Records showed that 2 identical suitcases were purchased on the day preceding the gruesome discovery, one in the afternoon and the other around 2 a.m., a timing that raised suspicions due to its unusual nature. Police officers promptly visited the store and obtained the surveillance camera footage. After reviewing the footage, they discovered that an elderly couple had purchased the first suitcase. Initially, they didn't raise any suspicions, but they were tracked down and were able to present the suitcase, explaining that it was bought for a vacation. However, the second suitcase was purchased by a young, athletic Latino man with very short hair, similar to a military haircut. This raised suspicions that he might be the person seen with Summer in the supermarket parking lot, as described by a witness. Additionally, the man bought disposable gloves at checkout, further arousing suspicions. The store's external surveillance cameras provided more information, showing the man leaving the store with the suitcase and loading it into a red van. With too many coincidences, the police believed they had identified the suspect and now needed to confirm his identity, locate him, and bring him in for questioning. The man took extreme precautions to avoid detection, using cash instead of a credit card to prevent leaving a digital trail. However, he overlooked the parking lot surveillance cameras, which clearly captured his vehicle's license plate number. The police quickly tracked the vehicle to a rental car company and identified the renter as Rosendo Rodriguez, a reservist in the U.S. Marine Corps. Rosendo had a clean record and was in town for a brief training stint with his unit. Initially, it was difficult for the police to locate Rosendo, as he wasn't staying at the same hotel as his unit. But with his personal details in hand, the police discovered that he had withdrawn a large sum of cash from an ATM at a different hotel, likely the money used to purchase the suitcase and gloves. Further investigation revealed that Rosendo had checked into this hotel under the name Thomas Rosendo, matching his physical description, on September 11th. It appeared that Rosendo had used an alias for unknown reasons. The investigation got a lucky break. Although Rosendo had already checked out of his hotel room, it hadn't been cleaned yet, and it contained crucial evidence. The carpet, bed, and walls had brown stains and splatters that looked like dried blood. A tag from a new suitcase was found near the bed. The trash had used contraceptives and disposable gloves in it. Forensic analysis confirmed the dried blood belonged to Summer. DNA on the contraceptives and gloves matched both Summer and Rosendo. This proved they had found the killer. However, Rosendo had already left the city by then. With this information, it was easy to track him down. Rosendo Rodriguez was born on March 26, 1980, in Wichita Falls, Texas. He came from a low-income family of Mexican immigrants and had a difficult childhood. His father, who struggled with alcoholism, was abusive to his wife and children. As a result, Rosendo was exposed to violence from an early age. He was aggressive and frequently got into fights at school. However, as he matured, he learned to manage his anger. After finishing high school, Rosendo attended Texas Tech University. He lived on his own and worked various jobs, including at a pizzeria and as an office clerk. Eventually, he decided to join the U.S. Marine Corps. His colleagues in the military described him as calm, disciplined, and reliable. They also saw him as a good friend who was always willing to help. Rosendo was well-educated and physically attractive, making him popular with women. On September 15th, Rosendo was arrested at his home in San Antonio. When the police arrived, he remained calm and seemed unaware of the seriousness of the situation. During the search, the police found a striped shirt and shorts that matched the outfit he wore when buying a suitcase. This was caught on surveillance footage. The police also seized his laptop and mobile phone. Initially, Rosendo refused to speak and denied any involvement in Summer Baldwin's murder for several weeks. However, faced with overwhelming evidence against him, he began to provide statements on the advice of his attorney. In these statements, he shared his own account of events, which notably diverged from the reconstruction put together by forensic experts. Rosendo initially stayed at a different hotel than his fellow servicemen due to a booking mistake. Although he realized the error after checking in, he chose not to relocate since the military leadership deemed it unnecessary. However, he failed to explain why he used a different name to register at the hotel on September 10th. That evening, Rosendo rented a van to get around the city more easily. He claimed to have met Summer Baldwin by coincidence. According to his account, he spotted a blonde woman sitting on a roadside bench, covering her face with her hands and seemingly crying. Concerned, he pulled over to check on her and see if she needed assistance. They started talking, and after she calmed down, they went to his hotel room, where they chatted, had a few drinks, but did not engage in any intimate activities. The next morning, Rosendo drove Summer home. They made plans to meet again in the evening. At around 9 p.m., he picked her up from the same location and they went to a supermarket. There, Summer ran into her friend Marjorie. Afterward, they returned to the hotel. According to Rosendo, he and Summer engaged in consensual intimacy at the hotel. However, the situation took a turn when Summer allegedly became aggressive and demanded money. This caught Rosendo off guard, as he claimed he was unaware that Summer was a sex worker. When he refused to pay, Summer reportedly pulled out a knife and threatened him. Rosendo managed to disarm her and punched her in the face, causing her nose to bleed. He claimed that he was acting in self-defense and did not intend to harm her. Shortly after, Summer collapsed onto the bed and began convulsing, foaming at the mouth. Rosendo stated that he attempted to help her but was hesitant to perform mouth-to-mouth resuscitation due to the blood and foam on her face. After a minute, Summer stopped breathing. Realizing Summer was dead, Rosendo panicked. He went to a nearby store, purchased a suitcase and gloves, and returned to the hotel. He then placed Summer's body in the suitcase and disposed of it in a dumpster, knowing it would be taken to the landfill the next morning. Afterward, he checked out of the hotel, returned the rental car, and drove back to San Antonio, pretending as though nothing had happened. Inconsistencies in the suspect's story raised suspicions among investigators. Rosendo Rodriguez's lies were evident due to numerous discrepancies in his account. One inconsistency arose when Marjorie, who met Summer in the parking lot on the night of the crime, stated that Summer mentioned the man was a client she had previously met for a paid encounter. However, Rosendo claimed their interaction was consensual, which contradicts evidence on Summer's body indicating she was taken advantage of. It is possible their initial encounter was consensual, leading Summer to agree to meet him again. Rosendo also claimed he only hit Summer once to calm her down, and she died from a seizure. But the autopsy revealed around 30 fresh bruises on Baldwin's head and body, as well as several stab wounds. Furthermore, evidence indicates she was alive when he packed her into the suitcase, which contradicts his claim that she was already dead. A search of Rosendo's laptop revealed a disturbing information in the days leading up to his arrest. He had been actively searching for information about Summer, including whether she was being searched for and if her body had been found in a landfill. Rosendo also frequently searched for information on Joanna Catherine Rogers, a 16-year-old girl from Lubbock who had gone missing a year and a half prior. Rosendo agreed to a plea deal that included a reduced sentence and no death penalty in exchange for explaining what happened to Joanna. He said he met Joanna, a high school student, in late April 2004. After a few meetings, they went to his hotel room on May 4th, where they got into an argument over money and potential rape allegations. The argument escalated, and Rosendo panicked, covering Joanna's mouth to quiet her, which unintentionally led to her death. In a desperate attempt to dispose of the body, Rosendo put it in his suitcase and threw it into a dumpster. This was the same method he used a year and a half later to dispose of Summer's body. Initially, Rosendo admitted to these events but later claimed his confession was false and that he had been coerced into making it. The police realized they needed to find Joanna's body to build a stronger case, so they launched a massive search of the city dump. Over a year later, they made a miraculous discovery, a suitcase containing Joanna's remains, despite severe decomposition. DNA testing confirmed the identity of the remains. This new evidence allowed authorities to charge Rosendo as a serial offender with a consistent modus operandi, committing similar heinous crimes. During the trial, the verdict was clear: Rosendo was guilty of first-degree murder. The court decided on the death penalty, largely due to the fact that Summer Baldwin was 3 months pregnant when she was murdered. This aggravating factor was a key consideration in the sentencing. Rosendo was sentenced to death by lethal injection. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Rosendo and his lawyers filed multiple appeals, claiming errors and misconduct by investigators. However, all appeals were rejected. While on death row, Rosendo maintained a blog on criminal justice and policy issues. On March 27, 2018, Rosendo Rodriguez was executed for his crimes at Huntsville Prison in Texas, one day after his 38th birthday. This marked the 4th execution in Texas and the 7th in the United States that year, nearly a decade after his conviction. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Doreen Erbert. Doreen Erbert was born on November 29, 1952, in California, into a family of 5 children. From a young age, she was a kind and positive person, always looking for ways to help others. After graduating from college, Doreen moved to San Francisco and began working as a physical therapist. At the age of 24, she met Michael Venice, a man who worked in a factory near Doreen's clinic. After getting to know each other for a while, Doreen and Michael started dating, and a few months later, they decided to get married. In 1976, they had a son named Paul. Initially, Michael and Doreen's life was very happy, but after having a child, their relationship began to have problems. After about a year, Doreen and Michael decided to divorce. Their son was raised by Doreen, while Michael was still allowed to visit him regularly. Despite the divorce, Michael and Doreen maintained a cordial relationship. A year later, Doreen met a man named Charles. They began dating, got married, and decided to move to San Jose, settling in a quiet residential area. In 1979, their daughter Deanna was born. Charles, like his wife, dreamed of having a large family. He was overjoyed when their daughter was born. However, tragedy struck the family in February 1980. 4-year-old Paul climbed over the fence around the pool and fell into the water. Doreen, who was home at the time, realized what had happened too late. She pulled her son out of the water and called an ambulance. Paul was taken to the hospital and put on life support. However, after 10 days, doctors concluded that there was no chance of survival. The decision was made to disconnect the boy from the machines. Doreen became depressed and devastated, blaming herself constantly, even though the police concluded that it was not her fault. However, Doreen's young daughter Deanna helped her through this pain. For years after the tragic event, Doreen's family finally had some good news. Doreen and Charles had been trying for another child, although they had failed twice due to interrupted pregnancies. But Doreen finally became pregnant again, and this time, everything went well. They were expecting a new baby boy, due in early November. A few days before Doreen was to be admitted to the hospital, her family decided to join in the Halloween festivities. On the evening of October 31st, all the neighbors decorated their houses and handed out candy to the children. Deanna, who was 4 years old at the time, was very keen to join in, and her parents couldn't say no. Although Doreen was 9 months pregnant, she went trick-or-treating with her daughter while Charles stayed home, handing out candy to other children. The mother and daughter returned home just before 9 p.m. Charles informed his wife that they were running out of candy and that he planned to drive to the nearest store to buy more. He left the house around 8:50 p.m. and returned about 15 minutes later. As he approached the house, Charles noticed that the front door was slightly ajar, which he found strange. When he entered, he found his wife lying on the hallway floor, surrounded by a large amount of blood. Doreen showed no signs of life, and Charles immediately called 911. Shortly thereafter, he noticed the body of their unborn child in the living room. Charles was in a state of shock, unable to believe what he was seeing. Initially, he thought that Doreen might have had a miscarriage, but he quickly realized that the situation was much worse. Beside the child was a human hand, and Charles immediately understood that it was Doreen's hand. When Charles realized that his family was being attacked, he began searching for Deanna, fearing she might be in danger. He saw so much blood on the floor that he slipped and fell while running through the house. Luckily, Deanna was still alive, but she was hiding behind the sofa in the living room out of fear. When the ambulance arrived, paramedics found Doreen and discovered that she had a weak pulse. They rushed her to the hospital, but unfortunately, doctors were unable to save her, and she died in the ambulance. Tragically, Doreen's unborn child also died from the brutal attack. Medical experts examined Doreen's body and concluded that she had been repeatedly hit with a long, sharp object like a sword or machete. The police investigated the house and found a horrifying scene that looked like something out of a horror movie. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, on the walls, and even on the ceiling. Several police officers sought psychological help after witnessing the horrific scene. Investigators searched the entire house but found no perpetrator or any clues about the attacker. While investigating the murder, police found significant evidence outside the house. They saw bloody footprints on the sidewalk and suspected that the killer had left the scene in a vehicle. While searching for more clues, police found a blood-stained wolf mask on the front lawn. They believed the mask might have belonged to the killer, as family members said they had never owned it. The mask was sent to a lab for analysis. Police then spoke to Deanna, the only surviving child from the murder. She was in shock but still able to talk. She told police that after her father left for the store, someone knocked on their door. Her mother, Doreen, opened the door and saw a man wearing a wolf mask holding a knife. The attacker said, "I'm going to kill you now." Doreen screamed, telling her daughter to run away from the house immediately. Deanna hid behind the sofa but could not remember what happened next. It was not until her father found her that Deanna calmed down. Unfortunately, Deanna was unable to provide any further information about the attacker, as he had hidden his identity behind the wolf mask. Investigators initially suspected Doreen's husband, Charles, as the prime suspect. Since he had been out of the house around the time Doreen was attacked, they were suspicious of his trip to the store. When Charles returned, he had stepped in blood several times and even fallen, ending up covered in blood, but the police did not know whether he had done this on purpose to explain the blood stains on his clothes. However, detectives found several problems with this theory. First, Charles's shoes did not match the ones that left bloody footprints on the road. Second, there were no traces of blood found in Charles's car, nor were there any other shoe prints. To clarify the information, the police went to the store that Charles visited and confirmed the time he was there. The employee confirmed that Charles had bought candy at the store that evening. This indicated that he did not have enough time to commit the murder. Surveillance footage also confirmed that Charles was at the store. Therefore, the police no longer considered him the prime suspect. First, they asked Charles if he could think of anyone who might want to harm his family, and Charles immediately mentioned Doreen's ex-husband, Michael. Charles said that initially, Michael maintained a normal relationship with his ex-wife. However, things changed after the death of their son. Michael believed that Doreen had intentionally killed the child to cut off all contact with him. Michael even filed a civil lawsuit against her, but he lost the case. Doreen thought that there was a reason behind the change in Michael's behavior. He had a history of depression after the birth of his son and was distant from both his wife and child. All of this made Michael introverted and caused communication problems. These problems became one of the main reasons why Michael and Doreen decided to divorce. Later, when Doreen married Charles, Michael began to harbor resentment and hostility towards her. This became even more apparent when Michael began to truly hate his ex-wife. Later, Michael lost his job at the place where he had spent most of his life. This created many negative issues in his life. After hearing all this information, the detectives decided to go to Michael's house and talk to him. Although Charles's testimony was not enough to make Michael the prime suspect, since he lived only 2 miles from Doreen's house, they decided to visit him immediately. Around midnight, the police arrived at Michael's house and saw a pickup truck parked near the garage. When they shined a flashlight inside the car, they saw what appeared to be blood on the steering wheel and keys. They then knocked on Michael's door, but no one answered. The lights were on inside the house, and the police could hear water running inside, which made them suspect that Michael might be destroying evidence or washing bloody clothes. So they continued knocking. Michael finally opened the door. He remained calm even after being informed of his ex-wife's murder. Michael answered all the police's questions calmly and allowed them into his home without a warrant. According to him, he had gone to the store during the day, returned home, and had not left since. Michael even signed a form giving the police permission to search his home. As he reached for a pen to sign, the investigators noticed a deep cut on his right hand. Michael explained that he had accidentally cut himself earlier while carving pumpkins for Halloween. However, the police were skeptical. The wound was still fresh, and blood was still oozing from it. As several police officers began searching Michael's home, he was asked to go upstairs with an officer to show his identification. However, when he entered the bedroom, Michael's actions aroused suspicion as he appeared to be reaching under the bed. The officer asked him to move away and found a loaded gun holster under the headboard. After discovering the weapon, the police took Michael downstairs to meet with other officers. Their colleagues discovered other suspicious evidence. They found drops of blood on the floor, which led them to the garage, where there was a washing machine and bloody clothing. Based on this evidence, the police had enough to arrest Michael. Detectives and forensic experts investigated Michael's home, looking for more evidence that could connect him to the murder. Police are awaiting the results of blood analysis and have discovered other grisly signs. Initially, the police discovered an empty box containing an 18-inch machete. Medical experts determined that the shape of the knife matched the wound on Doreen's body perfectly. In addition, the police found 2 makeshift coffins in Michael's home, raising suspicions that they might be for Doreen and Charles. They also found mortuary bags, the type typically used by paramedics, in Michael's home. The presence of these items made the police question Michael's innocence. After compiling all this evidence, the police decided to apply for a warrant for Michael's arrest. Without a warrant, they could only detain him for a limited time. However, the judge said that the evidence they had gathered was not strong enough and that there were many unknowns. As a result, Michael was released and he was freed. 3 days into the investigation, detectives received lab results. The results showed that there were 2 different blood types at the crime scene. The majority of the blood matched Doreen's blood type, while a small amount matched Michael's. This indicated that Michael had injured himself during the attack on his ex-wife. The judge quickly issued an arrest warrant, and Michael was charged with the murder of his ex-wife and her unborn child. Detectives continued their investigation and found additional evidence linking Michael to the crime. When they spoke to acquaintances of Michael, they learned that he owned the wolf mask found near Doreen's house. They also found a photo of Michael wearing the mask at a previous Halloween party. To further solidify the case, police found the mask Michael wore in the photo in his home. Michael's trial began in July 1988, 4 years after Doreen's murder. He initially admitted to the crime but later changed his story. He did not deny the murder but claimed he was innocent by reason of mental illness. A psychologist assigned to monitor him concluded that he did have serious mental illness. According to Michael, he became insane on Halloween night when he saw other children trick-or-treating. This reminded him of Paul's death and caused him to collapse. He said that he went to Doreen's house that night with a machete. When she opened the door, he said, "You killed my son," and that he intended to kill her. She immediately recognized the man behind the mask, shouted at her daughter to run, and the next second, Michael attacked her. However, Michael's story had one twist. He said he did not know Doreen was pregnant. This raised suspicions as all her friends claimed that she was clearly pregnant before the tragedy. They even joked that Doreen had become even bigger because of her pregnancy. The murder of Doreen and her unborn child came to light at a trial. The prosecution argued that Michael was fully aware of his actions and had planned to kill his ex-wife and her husband. He had told his friends about this desire, and detectives found evidence that he had made elaborate preparations, including 2 coffins and body bags, in his home. However, it appears that he changed his mind and did not carry out his murder plan. This led the prosecution to suspect that he may have feared being caught or discovered. One of the key witnesses in the case was Doreen's daughter, Deanna. She was only 9 years old at the time and still remembers what happened. After a year of investigation and trial, Michael was convicted of murder. He was sentenced to death, but before his execution, the state of California imposed a moratorium on executions. Therefore, Michael remains in custody and his sentence may not be carried out anytime soon. The case left a deep mark on Deanna's life. Years later, she was still haunted by the horrific memories of her mother's death. However, she decided to forgive Michael and try to forget the past. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rebecca Gould. Rebecca Gould was born on April 28, 1982, in the small town of Melbourne, Kansas, USA, to parents who were going through a divorce. Rebecca, along with her 3 sisters, was raised by her mother but still maintained a relationship with her father. The Gould sisters have a close relationship. They shared a difficult childhood which brought them closer together. Of the sisters, Rebecca and her youngest sister, Danielle, are the closest. In search of a better life and the opportunity to pursue a university education, Rebecca decided to leave her hometown and move to Fayetteville, Arkansas. There, she enrolled in a community college and worked part-time. Danielle also moved to Fayetteville to live with her sister. She helped Rebecca take care of the family and pursue her dream of earning a university degree. One day, during a trip back to her hometown, Rebecca met Casey, whom she noticed and felt something different about. They started dating and gradually fell in love. Although they lived far apart, she and Casey shared beautiful moments together. The relationship between Rebecca and Casey grew stronger. On the morning of September 20th, 2004, Rebecca was scheduled to go to Melbourne to pick Casey up from work at a fast food restaurant. After buying coffee and sandwiches, she decided to go back to the mobile home and take a nap before returning to Fayetteville. Meanwhile, Danielle was at Casey's house waiting for Rebecca to pick her up. Rebecca and Danielle had planned for Rebecca to pick Danielle up at noon. However, Danielle tried calling and texting Rebecca but was unable to reach her sister. Danielle then decided to call Rebecca's friends but still did not receive any news. Danielle became increasingly worried. Danielle decided to go to the police station to report Rebecca missing. The police began investigating Rebecca's disappearance by questioning potential witnesses. The first person they chose to question was Casey. the last person to see Rebecca alive. The detectives went to the restaurant where Casey worked and asked him about Rebecca. Casey said that he had slept over at a friend's house and went straight to work the next morning without seeing Rebecca as usual. He assumed Rebecca had left town with Danielle some time ago. Even though Casey had an alibi, the police still felt suspicious of him. They found it strange that he had left his dog alone at home to spend the night at a friend's house. Furthermore, why would he decide to sleep over at a friend's house the night before his girlfriend left? This was one inconsistency in Casey's story that the police noticed. The police thoroughly searched the mobile home where Casey lived and where Rebecca was last seen. They detected a lingering smell of bleach, apparently used to cover up some sort of incident. Rebecca's belongings were still in place, but the bed was in disarray, and the sheets were rumpled. One of them showed blood stains. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood was Rebecca's. Casey immediately became a suspect. However, he had a solid alibi. Several witnesses had seen Rebecca personally driving him to work on Monday morning, and from 8:30 to 4:30, Casey was consistently present at the restaurant. The investigation hit a dead end until a call from a passerby. A week later, a passerby discovered the body of a young girl, brutally mutilated and dumped at the bottom of a shallow ravine outside the city. Police searched the area thoroughly for traces and physical evidence. It was not difficult to identify the murdered girl as Rebecca Gould. She was wearing the same t-shirt and underwear she had been last seen in alive. An autopsy later revealed that her death had occurred about 7 days earlier, on the same Monday, September 20th, when Casey had spent the night at a friend's house. Investigators found signs of brutal beatings on Rebecca's body, including multiple bruises, a broken nose, and a fractured skull. Of particular note were 2 blunt force injuries to the head. These were clearly fatal. The shape of these injuries matched the shape of the missing leg from the piano in Casey's mobile home. Police believed it could have been used as a murder weapon, but they were unable to find it. The details of Rebecca's autopsy revealed the horrific brutality of her killer. In addition to the injuries to her head and neck, she also showed signs of strangulation. A broken hyoid bone indicated a prolonged and brutal strangulation. At the same time, there were no signs of resistance or self-defense, which suggested that the attacker may have been someone she knew and who attacked her from behind. The lack of signs of sexual violence also suggested that rape was not the motive for the murder. Detectives continued to investigate Casey, Rebecca's boyfriend. Several witnesses recalled that Rebecca had talked about wanting to break up with Casey because she was fed up with his constant arguments and controlling behavior. Casey's excessive possessiveness became apparent, especially after Rebecca moved to another city to study. However, Casey's alibi forced the police to look for other leads and suspects. Over time, numerous people connected to Rebecca were investigated, but to no avail. The murder of Rebecca Gould went cold. But in the late 2010s, a surprising breakthrough occurred. A podcast series dedicated to Rebecca's murder caught the attention of a man who claimed to have valuable information about the case. The anonymous witness spoke of a confession he had heard, in which he said he had worked with Casey, the victim's boyfriend, years earlier. At one point, after a few drinks, Casey blurted out that he had killed Rebecca. The witness said that Casey confessed to the crime when he was drunk. However, what was suspicious was that the witness had remained silent for many years and only spoke up when his relationship with Casey became strained. Investigators initially viewed the witness's testimony with skepticism. They suspected that the man's testimony was just a way to get revenge and frame Casey. However, they could not dismiss the testimony either. They decided to continue investigating and look for more evidence. After more than a month of investigation, the detectives still had not found enough evidence to charge Casey. However, they felt that the solution was somewhere nearby. They decided to focus on people related to Casey. particular attention was paid to William Miller, Casey's cousin, who had arrived in town before the murders. At first, William seemed like a minor character, but as the detectives reconstructed the events, his role in the case began to become clearer. William had left the United States after the murder and moved to the Philippines. This made the detectives suspicious. However, since the Philippines did not have an extradition treaty with the United States, interrogating William became impossible. The detectives could only hope that William would return to the United States and come to their attention. Meanwhile, they found some information on social media. William had joined a discussion group about the case and started commenting on posts. He described the area where the mutilated body was found with surprising accuracy. William's behavior raised suspicions. The detectives felt that they were getting closer to solving the case, but they still needed to find more evidence to be able to charge William. Why would someone who had lived on the other side of the world for years suddenly become so absorbed in the details of a tragedy that happened so long ago? Moreover, William's accurate description of the details of the case is almost astonishing. William Miller found his way back to the United States 16 years after Rebecca Gould's disappearance. Investigators finally had the opportunity to ask him some important questions. The police had previously tried to contact him because of a tip from the community. They suspected that he might have a connection to Rebecca. Investigators began by asking him about his life, especially his time in the Philippines. William made no secret of the fact that he was wealthy. He owned a spacious farm with a family and animals. During the conversation, he also talked about his relationship with Casey. He denied seeing Casey the night before Rebecca disappeared, but he also accidentally revealed that he witnessed an argument between Casey and Rebecca. Investigators felt that he had important information that he could not share because of legal restrictions. William reluctantly added that he never saw Rebecca again, dead or alive. This statement became an important clue for the police, as they realized that information about Rebecca's death had not been made public, making William's knowledge suspicious. Investigators decided to employ a trick to test William. They brought photos of William's car taken in 2004 into the interrogation room and claimed that there was blood on the gas pedal, matching Rebecca Gould's. Upon hearing this, William became nervous and began to fumble his testimony. He gave several implausible versions of events, including seeing a stranger in a white van near Casey's mobile home and accidentally witnessing a robbery. These bizarre stories only reinforced the impression that William had something to hide. Finally, William announced he was ready to tell the whole truth. He recounted that on the morning of September 20th, 2004, he had gone hunting and stopped by Casey's mobile home to borrow a cell phone. Rebecca, who was inside, sensed no danger and opened the door for William. William suddenly lunged at Rebecca, knocking her to the ground and began beating her with his fists and random objects. He took a broken piano leg and repeatedly struck the defenseless Rebecca over the head. To ensure she was dead, William strangled her with a pair of tights he found in the room. After killing Rebecca, William wrapped her body in a suitcase, mopped the bloody floor, stuffed the blankets and sheets in the washing machine, and turned the mattress upside down to hide the evidence. He took Rebecca's body out of town and threw it into the nearest ravine. Investigators listening to this bizarre confession were haunted by a simple question: why? What drove this seemingly respectable family man to commit such a terrible crime? William swore he had no intention of raping Rebecca and that there was no romantic or sexual relationship between them. He had not robbed her and had no personal grievances or grudges. The reason, he said, was a spontaneous rage at the weakness he sensed in Rebecca. Rebecca had not said anything offensive or done anything wrong. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. For years, William Miller had boasted about his crimes and taunted the police. Joining the online group became a gain for him, a chance to prove his superiority over the law once again. However, Was Rebecca Gould Williams' only victim? This became the central question for the detectives. In order to find out more information, they resorted to a ruse. They thought this could help them discover the truth. When they told William that they knew of other murders with a method similar to Rebecca's, William began to cry and beg for mercy. He then revealed a series of new details about his crimes, which horrified the detectives. According to William, he was not just a lone killer but a true maniac. At least 5 lives were lost at his hands. The victims were mostly young women, including prostitutes and hitchhikers. William would pick them up on the highway, lure them to deserted places, and then brutally murder them. William did not rape these women. Instead, he derived pleasure from the killing process itself. He watched the life fade from the eyes of his captives, savoring their terror and despair. Then, he would strangle them with their clothes. The detectives listened attentively to William's confession, feeling horrified. They realized that they had encountered a living serial killer, which could help them solve many cases. However, the detectives also questioned the authenticity of William's confession. To verify the information, they asked William to provide more details about the victims and where they were buried. William provided some information, but it was not detailed enough. He gave some descriptions of the victims but did not provide specific information about the locations or dates of the murders. In the end, the detectives relied on a rough map that William had marked with some of the possible locations where the victims' remains might be found. William's testimony was still valuable. The detectives knew that they had months, if not years, of hard work and careful examination ahead. They would have to search for missing bodies, compare DNA, and identify the victims. The most important thing was that William would eventually go to prison and never be able to hurt anyone again. William had revealed too many details that only the killer would know. His testimony matched the autopsy results and the circumstances of the crime scene perfectly. In November 2022, more than 5 years after William Miller was arrested, the case finally came to a close. William was charged with the premeditated murder of Rebecca Gould. However, investigators did not have enough evidence to charge him with other crimes. The court decided to focus on the 16-year-old murder case. The prosecutor argued that a life sentence was appropriate for William. They believed that he was no longer a human being but a killer who posed a direct threat to society. The prosecutor believed that if William were released, even for a day, he would surely commit more crimes. In contrast to the prosecutor, William's lawyers emphasized that he was not responsible for his actions because of his mental illness. They urged the jury to sympathize with their client and allow him to be treated in an appropriate psychiatric facility. In the end, the court convicted William Miller of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole in 25 years. If William were released, he would be 72 years old. The verdict shocked the people of Melbourne. Many protested that the sentence was too lenient. In their view, a person who committed such a crime did not deserve parole. Some argued that the investigation had watered down the crime and weakened the case to avoid affecting the clearance rate. Ultimately, William's conviction automatically cleared Casey, who many townspeople considered the real killer. Despite the skepticism and outrage, the fact remains that one of the most famous and mysterious murders in Melbourne's history has finally been solved. The real killer, a serial killer and psychopath, was imprisoned, not for life, but long enough to protect society from further victims. While not all the mysteries were solved, Rebecca's family finally knew the truth. They could begin to heal their emotional wounds. Months have passed since William Miller's arrest, and life in Melbourne is slowly returning to normal. Rebecca Gould's family is trying to come to terms with their grief. Her mother has found the strength to visit her daughter's grave for the first time in years. Her father has also opened her childhood toys and photo albums, which have been hidden in the attic for a long time. Rebecca's sisters have grown up and are trying to make up for lost time, calling each other regularly to share their grief. Rebecca's best friend, Casey, has decided to stay in Melbourne. He feels he must prove that he can build a new life despite the pain and loss he has experienced. He rarely visits the old mobile home, which holds so many painful memories. But when he gets the chance, he brings white roses to the door, Rebecca's favorite flower. William Miller, who caused pain to Rebecca's family, seems to have accepted his fate in prison. He behaves quietly, trying not to attract undue attention. He willingly communicates with a psychiatrist and takes prescribed medication. However, from time to time, a strange smile flashes across his face, as if reflecting something dark that has long been hidden under a mask of kindness. This story is a testament to the inevitability of justice. Sometimes it seems that evil is winning and criminals are getting away with it, but in reality, it is not. Sooner or later, punishment comes to all those who have crossed the line of humanity, and when it does, there is no turning back, only bitterness, loneliness, and the burden of guilt to carry to the end.